now that I fixed the mic, you should be able to hear me. Hello, good morning, and welcome to the Machine Learning and Natural Language Processing Coffee Chat, where every week we talk about stuff that's happened in machine learning and natural language processing. I'm Dr. Rachel Tapman. Hey Dana, welcome. And my channel slash podcast slash live stream, depending on where you're watching slash listening to this, is for anyone who cares about language technology and other people. And as usual, first of all, I should get all of my chats in places where I can see them. Otherwise, I'm going to have a hard time seeing them. All right, we're good. As usual, I've broken stuff down by general topic. So we'll start with research. We got a little bit more digital humanities stuff this week, which should be fun. And then we'll talk about professional things, news, announcements, etc. that's probably going to impact us in our work. Hey, Sean, welcome. And then we're going to talk about politics, which we have a fair amount to cover today. Yes. And then ethics, and this is sort of, research on the area, general news stories that I think are particularly relevant. And of course, it'll be similar in content to the politics section, except not talking about things that are law yet. And then finally, we always end on a fun note, something a little bit lighthearted, because sometimes we talk about things that aren't super lighthearted, and I think it's important to have balance. So let's hop in and get started with the research. All right. So this first paper, this is archive, but this paper has been accepted to EMNLP. So this is an actual preprint and not a quote preprint of a paper that will never be published. And it's important to distinguish between the two because some of the latter are gray literature, some of them are white papers, some of them are straight up marketing. Important distinctions. So the title of the paper is, "Are all spurious features in natural language alike? An analysis through a causal lens." Those of you who watch the channel routinely may know that causal modeling is a field of statistics that I was particularly interested in graduate school and have kind of kept up with a little bit. And someone asked about it the other day about applications of causal modeling to natural language processing in particular, which, voila, here is one. And it is by Nitish Joshi. Again, if I ever mispronounce anyone's name and you know the correct pronunciation, please feel free to correct me. I would love to say things right and not wrong. Xiang Pen and He He. So let's take a look at this paper. And institutional affiliations. They all have an institutional affiliation with New York University. All right, let's zoom in a little bit, and I will, we'll start with the abstract and then do our classic skim the paper and get out the highlights. So the term spurious correlations has been used in NLP to informally denote any undesirable feature label correlations. However, correlation can be undesirable because 1, the feature is irrelevant to the label, e.g. punctuation in a review. First of all, incorrect. Punctuation is absolutely relevant to review contents, but I'll set that aside. I understand that a lot of people in NLP don't consider, subword tokens to be that important, but they are, and that's a hill that I'm happy to die on. 2, the feature's effect on the label depends on the context, e.g. negation words in a review. This one I agree with. Oh, okay, so Tom says that my pronunciation of Nitish was correct, as someone who works with a Nitish. Thank you. Always good to hear that I did okay. I do try. Which is ubiquitous in language tasks. So, for example, an example of spurious negation in a review would be something like, I went to see this movie. It wasn't the best movie I've seen this year. It was the best movie I've seen this decade, right? Which is obviously an extremely positive review. But if you're just looking at negation, or even, just the phrase wasn't the best, you may, depending on your methods, you may end up marking that as having negative sentiment or negative review qualities, even though in context that's not the case. In case 1, we want the model to be invariant to the feature, which is neither necessary nor sufficient for prediction. But in case 2, even an ideal model, e.g. humans, must rely on the feature since it is necessary but not sufficient for prediction. But basically what they're saying is your model should be able to ignore punctuation because they don't think it's relevant. I think they are wrong. Punctuation is one of the things that I studied, and it turns out that punctuation and patterns of capitalization are in fact very relevant to the content and meaning of text, but English text, I should say, specifically. And in 2, they're saying we can't just ignore negation because it's meaningful. We just need to know that we can't just be like, hey, if the word not is in the review, automatically it's a bad review, because that's, you know, reducing the complexity of language. Data says, if one says that punctuation is irrelevant, they must agree that let's eat grandma and let's eat grandma are the same. Yeah, I think when a lot of people say punctuation is irrelevant, what they mean is they haven't thought very much about prosody, which I would say is true of a lot of people working in NLP, and that is okay, you know. Depending on your task, prosody may not actually be important, but it may also be. So prosody are non-lexical uses of intonation, so tone and volume, to provide additional information about semantics and the syntactic structure of the phrase. Dana says, commas save lives. True. Night Gaming, how do I select these papers for the coffee chat? Great question. Basically, am I interested in them, right? Do I think that they are a cool and interesting contribution? And I don't, you know, go through and read them beforehand. I do just sort of skim them, but yeah. Basically, luck of the draw. Did it happen to catch my eye? Therefore, a more fine-grained treatment of spurious features is needed to specify the desired model behavior. And this I would agree with. And I would say, like, for a specific task, some textual features are going to be irrelevant. Some textual features are going to be relevant but potentially misleading if they are used in isolation. We formalize this distinction using a causal model, I promise you causal modeling, and probabilities of necessity and sufficiency, which delineates the causal relationships between a feature and a label. So necessity is you need this, sufficiency is you need only this. We then show that this distinction helps explain results of existing debiasing methods on different spurious features and demystify surprising results, such as the encoding of spurious features in model representations after debiasing. Tom says, with sufficient context, punctuation may become irrelevant. I would say that punctuation is part of the context, right? Particularly in short form text, which a lot of reviews tend to be. There is a semantic, well, there may not be a semantic, but there's a pragmatic difference between 1 exclamation point and 10 exclamation points, right? As an example, there's a pragmatic difference between a period and an ellipsis. There's a pragmatic difference in, you know, I know this isn't exactly punctuation, but a review where all of the text is on a single line and a review where each word is on a separate line, right? And these are features that are usually removed during data cleaning under the assumption that they are not meaningful and not useful signal, which again, I would strongly disagree with based on my own research. So. All right, so that is sort of their hypothesis, is that they can use causal modeling to pick apart which features are, you know, genuinely helpful and which ones aren't. And given that I think that punctuation is actually probably a useful signal depending on your task, I would probably not be as mystified or surprised by, you know, those features being encoded in model representations. I also am interested to know, so no one here, it looks like, has any linguistic affiliations. I don't know that that means they don't have linguistic training, but this is definitely more on the sort of like pragmatics, sociolinguistics, you know, digital humanities potentially side of things, which my general impression is doesn't get taught in most CS departments. So And I'm going to be right back. I'm going to get a blanket. I'm a little bit chilly. Which is my button for that? Is it this one? I'm back. Sorry, I had to fight my dog for it. I did not have to fight him. He was just on it and gave me big sad eyes when I came and took it. Yes. And so I think this is actually probably a better example than their punctuation example of irrelevant and necessary features. So Spielberg's new film is brilliant, having a positive, label, and Blank's new film is brilliant also has a positive label. So removing or replacing the name of the director doesn't change the outcome, whereas removing or replacing something like a negation particle may or may not. So as they say, the negation word is necessary and it is not possible to determine the label without it. So are these necessary features? Yes. So I'm just like sort of scrolling and skimming. One key observation is the feature can be considered spurious for different reasons, which they talk about. We do not want the model to rely on the director name because removing or changing it does not affect the sentiment. In contrast, a model should not solely rely on negation. They're still necessary for prediction. It is impossible to determine the label without knowing its presence. Current methods do not treat the two types of features separately. We show this can lead to misleading interpretation of the results. And I would say there's definitely a situation in which, right, a specific director's name may be relevant to assigning the label, right? So let's say if generally people have a very strong positive opinion of a specific director. If I am comparing a film to that director's work, that would assume to be a positive assumption, right? Like, I don't know, I'm not that familiar with film directors, but if you were like, this work is as good as, it's the best horror director I know, somebody, I guess Peele, a well-known horror director, then that would be a positive discussion and would probably affect the label. So I don't know that you want to, I think what they're doing here is they're removing relevant entities to the film, but they shouldn't be removing all the entities probably. Tom says, I don't disagree. Humans can often infer and correct punctuation, however. Yeah, that is true. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. But I would also say, I'm assuming you're replying to sort of Dino's example of, or a similar example would be eats, shoots, and leaves. So is it a panda that is eating those things, or is it three separate activities that are occurring one after another? So if it's a semantic differential, then I would say, yes, absolutely. People can generally pick it apart dependent on context. But right, looking at your own, type, for those of you who are listening, the first span has 3 periods after it. The second span has 2 periods after sure. I'm getting information with that, right? So I'm not reading that as sure. I'm reading that as sure, right? For me, it's changing your social meaning in context and what you're trying to communicate to me. Also, I read it as potentially a little bit age graded. So I think that, I am assuming based on your patterns of punctuation and capitalization, you're probably not a Zoomer. You're probably not in your teens. I'm getting maybe sort of elder millennial, Gen X-y or older. You don't have to tell me if I'm right or not, but this is just social information that I am deducing based on your patterns of punctuation. And if it's not correct, then perhaps it is something that you've intentionally affected to try and get people to have that understanding of your language usage. So if we look at like Ravi's punctuation, underneath, you'll notice, so just to read what Ravi said, he is mad, that's in quotes, here is irrelevant, we should remove is. Same thing mostly with punctuation, not so important. And you'll notice that outside of quotes, Ravi is not using punctuation, Ravi is not using, sentence capitalization. To me, this reads as, more informal, possibly a little bit younger. I would guess that Ravi is younger than Tom. Right, so there is information there. There is social information there. There's communicative information there. I don't know. Baby out with the bathwater is the thing that often comes up. Gohaku says, Zoomers have so many typos. Will that make me a Zoomer? I'm a millennial. I'm solidly a millennial. Yeah. Tom says, read too many books. Antisocial. Ravi says, for example, if I say to you, hey, Rachel, with an exclamation point, here, the exclamation point is relevant. It's not. It's telling me about your emotional state that you're trying to communicate, right? Exclamation points mean something. They mean something in a social context. All of your language choices, however unconsidered, have a social component to them, and you may think that they don't, but that does not mean that that is the case, right? So I would say this paper so far is feeling fairly unlinguistic-y, but that is okay. You don't need to be a linguist to do NLP, obviously. Looks at the field, yeah, that seems to be the trace. Yes, and I do think there is, a fundamental point here that they're making that is important, and that is some of these features are low information, and some of these features ideally should be no information. So I get the point that they're making. Ravi says, okay. You're free to disagree with me, but this is my firmly held, scholarly belief based on my own work. Yes. So, and even, sorry, I'm going to belabor this a little bit more, but if I covered your usernames, right, and I just had some text spans from both Tom and Ravi, I would know who wrote which, right? It is indicative about you as a person, particularly here where it's mostly you two chatting. Like, I can tell them apart. These are meaningful features for me. Alexi says, they're different internet language cultures depending on the country and period. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep, and there's, age changes. So there's a difference between change in progress and age grading, where change in progress is something that is happening. So the older people tend to have the older form, newer people tend to have the newer form. Age grading is something that, younger people tend to do more and older people tend to do less. That's sort of consistent. And I would have said a couple years ago that like sentence case and sentence punctuation was age grading, and as people wrote more and more professional texts, they would sort of fall into that, and then have more diversity in their sublexical features or extra lexical features after they were no longer actively in the work environment. But given sort of discussions that I've seen and example emails I've seen from particularly younger workers, I don't know that that's the case anymore. So this may be something that used to be age grading and is changing into change in progress. Oh. Alexi says, I can recognize whether a person joined the Russian internet in 2000-ish just by a couple words they would use. Yes. Tom says, I started using a blog post on ellipsis and started using ellipses less. Yeah, but that's interesting how that is something that you read about and began to attach a social judgment to and began to change. Kohaku says, are there applications to this, such as cyberbullying or catching criminals, cyberbullying detection? So particularly the use of capitalization and punctuation. My idea for an application was, this was, 2016, before large language models were a thing, was to identify people who were pretending to be members of a community, but had not been part of that community long enough to accurately use features, especially these things that people don't think about quite as much, actively using features in a way that matched community norms. But yeah, a good question mark, right? I think mostly the utility of this is knowing or having a sort of an instinct about whether or not you can remove this to reduce your vocabulary size, or, you know, add another feature and then remove it to reduce the vocabulary size or not. So question mark. Robbie says, can you know anybody's behavior based on text? But he, she writes. I mean, writing is a behavior, right? I can know about their writing behavior. Everyone can. Tom says, text messages use lowercase and no period. I get text messages from people who sentence case and punctuate things. And I will leave it as an exercise to the reader to deduce things about those people who are sending me those text messages. Anyway, so going to the causal modeling. So what the causal modeling that they approach that they're using here, just sort of from skimming it, seems to be, can we erase the edge between this feature, the input feature and the output feature or output label or not? And if we can't erase that edge with a certain degree of, you know, certainty, then probably that feature can be safely ignored or removed completely. And if we can't, we probably do have to keep it up. But it may be potentially misleading depending on its distribution in the training data. Yeah. Haku says, a chatbot that can talk casually, that's the bot for me. Some of the psychological chatbots are bad at chatting. Yeah, so chit chat is a specific task in NLP in the chatbot domain, which is chatting, just sort of talking and maintaining a coherent conversation. Yes. So that's sort of how they're operationalizing this in this distinction that they're proposing in a mathematical way. So here, you know, so if we're looking at this top feature, you can see that there is no, you can't actually, if you're listening to this. So this is directed acyclic graph. It looks a little bit like a neural network. You have the common cause of the words, and then in the middle you have all the words, and then on the other side you have the output. And for some of the words you have an edge that goes from the cause to the word to the label, and for some of the others you do not, right? So the sentence is, Titanic is great. Titanic has a causal edge to the word, but does not have an edge from the label, from the word to the label, whereas great does have a causal edge from the word to the label. And for the second type, which is the negation type that they were talking about, the example is, it's not good, where good does have a link to the label, and so does not. So you can't erase that edge between not and the label. You can erase the edge between Titanic and the label. That's the general idea of causal modeling, is you gain enough information to be able to, with a certain degree of certainty, erase those edges. And the edges that cannot be erased and remain are assumed to have a causal relationship to the output variable. All right. So just sort of going through, they're talking about various types of entailment. Interesting. I'm slightly, this must be one of their experiments, is estimating entailment. I am a little bit surprised that they would do that, given that sort of their initial setup and discussion seemed to be much more about sentiment detection and like movie rating detection. Gohaku says, from the makers of Grammarly comes casually, like causally. Yes. More discussions, implications, decorrelating the spurious features and labels. How many pages is this? This is, okay, so the preprint must have significant additional work, because this is 14 pages, and I believe a long paper DMNLP is 8 pages. So this is about twice as long as I was expecting. Interesting. Yes, so the sort of general contribution of this paper is that they provide evidence that, some features are unnecessary and insufficient and should just be removed. I'm assuming was what they would argue. Other features are necessary but not sufficient, so you need them, but you can't use just them. We further showed how this distinction makes it challenging to evaluate model robustness and learn robust models. In particular, unlike low PN spurious features that are irrelevant to prediction, high PN features interact with other features to influence the label. Therefore, they do not have a clean relationship to the label that allows us to enforce independence or invariance during training. Perhaps a pessimistic takeaway is that there is not much we can do about high PN spurious features. The key problem is that the model fails to learn the rare or unseen compositions of the necessary spurious features and other features, e.g. different constructions that involve negation. That said, we believe large language models suggest promising solutions because 1, they have good representations of various constructions in natural language. 2, they can bypass the problem of dataset bias and supervised learning through few-shot in-context learning. The citation needed. And 3, they can take additional inductive bias. They can take additional inductive bias for the task through natural language prompting, e.g. chain of thought. Yes, prompting, clearly not a dataset. We hope that our result will spur future work on training and evaluating spurious correlations that are more suitable for spurious features arising in natural language. Limitations that they discuss. Interesting. So this is very much a statisticky paper that happens to use language as its target domain. And just looking at one of these tables here, extractability of the spurious features for various robust training methods. Blue denotes an increase, whereas red denotes a decrease in extractability from the baseline. For high PN spurious features like lexical overlap, the feature is as easy, if not easier, to extract after debiasing as compared to the baseline, in contrast to the low PN feature punctuation. Dano says, so much faith in low few-shot learning. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, if you're fairly new to the field, there certainly have been a lot of glowing, excited papers and discussions of it recently. So, but yes, I would say not. I don't necessarily share their rosy outlook. So I don't have enough context to read this table. I'm going to need to read more things. Extractability compression of the spurious feature is a function of bias strength on the synthetic data. The high PN feature, it's synthetic data. Get out of here. Synthetic data. Ugh. I get why they use synthetic data, given that they are attempting to look at the relationship of features in natural language. My strong, as a linguist, domain influence is to always use real data. Yeah. Tom says, it feels like they are assuming there's less bias in Common Crawl or whatever your LLM is trained on. Yes, which I think is, again, citation needed. T-Prototype says, I have a question regarding data annotation text data. Can I ask here? If yes, can you tell me when the right time is? Yeah, feel free. I'm going to continue to read this thing. So the 2 debiasing, so they have 3 debiasing methods: subsampling, productive expert, and debiased focal loss, all of which explicitly or implicitly break the feature label correlation during training. I vaguely remember the productive expert paper, or discussions of productive expert when it came out a couple of years ago, but it's been a while. And vaguely remembering is about the best I'm going to get. We also train using ERM on the original bias dataset as a baseline. What is ERM? All methods use Roberta Large. What is ERM? One sec. Undefined. ERM. The heck is this? Enterprise risk management. Probably not. Exchange rate mechanism? Let's see if I can get a disambiguation page on Wikipedia. Might be helpful. Effects range median. In environmental toxicology. Probably not that. Entity relationship model? An entity relationship model describes interrelated things of interest in a specific domain of knowledge. A basic entity relationship model is comprised of entity types and specific relationships that can exist between entities. So that, I'm assuming that's what they did. I don't have additional context. But for the real data, in some, we show that breaking the correlation between a feature and a label, e.g. through data balancing, does not necessarily remove the feature from the learned representation. I think that makes sense. The high PN features can still be detected from the composite features on which the label depends. Right, so this only... I think there's a assumption that they are making here that is sort of coloring their methodology and also how they are approaching this problem, which I don't think holds in a linguistic context, but may be accurate enough to still be helpful. Yeah, Tom Wright says ERMs are databases, so I'm doubtful. Yeah, I have no idea what they're talking about. Could use more information. And their general assumption, also I'm just going to do a quick little, you will excuse me if I just look at citation dates really quickly. Have they cited anything from before 2010? Something from 2000, the class and balance problem, significance and strategies, but not in NLP. In NLP from before 2010. Method for stochastic optimization. Judea Pearl from 99, that's causal modeling. 2009, causality. 2016 is squad, so it's still firmly in that sort of era. It looks like no, absolutely not. Okay, so this is, I think this may also be a product of the time period that they are reading in the literature and sort of the shallowness of the citation network. But there is an edge that they are not erasing, that they are assuming does not exist, and so do not have to account for. But definitely is there. So overall, I think this is not a bad idea, but I think their surprise about the fact that if you sort of balance tokens in the two classes, you still get an effect of those tokens is due in part to the fact that they are treating words as independent units that can occur together, right? So they're using sort of the bag of words assumption. So the bag of words assumption is that ordering doesn't matter and you can sort of treat things as a unit, but they're not considering the edges between the words, right? So in, this example, there is, grammatically an edge between Titanic and is, because is, even just grammatically, the conjugation of that word is dependent on grammatical information from the subject of the sentence, in this case, Titanic, right? Or even its, right? Whether or not you treat it as one or two tokens, right? Not has a relationship. It's not independent from its, right? They have a grammatical relationship to each other. They have a distributional relationship to each other. Depending on your personal stance on syntax, they may or may not have a syntactic relationship to each other. And I'm not going to say which direction that goes because I don't want to get in a fight with syntacticians. But they are assuming that words are IID. which is not a good assumption in a natural language context. And I think a lot of their sort of puzzlement about like, hey, even if we're balancing these words, they still have an effect, is because words are not individual independent units that vary independently. They co-vary, right? They have an effect on each other. And I think part of the reason that they're sort of making that general assumption and, you know, don't talk about things like parsing or heads or scope of negation. Actually, let me double check that they don't in fact talk about the scope of negation. Yeah, they don't. Maybe parse? Nope. I'm just searching to see if they use various words. They didn't. Is because they don't have the sort of more formal structural training in linguistics. So yes, I'm not surprised that they are unable to, you know, reduce the weight of the features to 0 by mixing them up, because they are still using natural language. And even with data balancing, those words are going to have effects on other words in the phrases. So, yeah, Tom says, what's the significance of before 2010? Before 2010 equals old school NLP/linguistics. Great question. So I just sort of picked it kind of at random. So 2017 was the transformer paper. It was definitely in the air on 2016. So after that time, and it looks like pretty much everything that they've cited has been in the transformer space. Before then, we were talking more, you know, things like the order that words are in. What's the word I'm looking for? So more like recurrent neural networks. When was the word vector papers? One sec. Let's see. I don't remember the citation dates for that off the top of my head. But my sort of assumption is that if you were reading papers in NLP from 2010, you're probably not going to be able to completely avoid discussions of structure and rule-based and context-free grammar ways of approaching these problems. So Firth was in the 50s. Okay, so the paper for document embeddings was 2020. The Bengio paper on neural probabilistic language models was in 2000. So I'm not expecting them to like bust out context-free grammars, but that would be sort of more drawing on the corpus methods, where assumptions of independence aren't always made. Yeah. N-gram stuff? Yeah. So N-gram stuff, that's sort of more statistical linguistics. Sometimes people would talk about it as opposed to sort of rule-based linguistics. So 2000 to 2010 into the teens, and then sort of teens to 20s is more transformer-based. Yep. But, you know, what you would learn, I think N-grams are a great example here, is that the relationships between adjacent words or even adjacent pairs of words or, you know, skip grams, whatever you're using, they are not independent of each other. And somebody asked, let me see if, who asked about it? Oh yeah, so Tom asked what the causal tree loop should look like. Well, first of all, I don't think it's necessarily gonna be a DAG, which would be a directed acyclic graph, which would be kind of an issue for treating it as causal modeling. Because, yeah, so being able to formalize the relationship between the words here would require picking a syntactic formalism, and I'm not going to do that. But there would definitely be sort of like vertical edges between those words that are always going to hold regardless of what the cause of the sentence is, right? That would represent the underlying linguistic structure, which you can't get out of the linguistic structure, unfortunately. I don't say unfortunately. It is a truth of language, natural human language, that it is always structured. And in this case, I think that is just not something that's on these folks' radar. And as a result, the things that they are surprised by, I am not, especially because I had that training and that way of looking at things. So, TF-IDF, yeah, you know, it's not that independent. All right, so that was that first paper. I think it's interesting. I like causal modeling. I think it's in terms of explainability, I think it's particularly tractable. Computationally, it's a little bit less tractable, but in terms of like helping people understand, you know, what affected this model decision, I think it's great. I think it could be great for explainability things. I think that this could be a very useful method in combination with other methods. I don't think it will be sufficient on its own because of the not considering the relationship between the words. So there are assumptions of independence here that I don't think hold in a natural language context. All right. I mean, another way that you could get around that is not treating lexical items as the features and using some other sort of they talked about construction, so maybe using like phrases as the features might get them a little bit further, but then, of course, the wonderful combinatorics of language comes in and you're going to start to get a very sparse model indeed. So I understand why they didn't do it. All right, next up. Tom says, can you embed in a vector space where you get causal independence? Sure, if you're not working with human language. Yes. I don't really know off the top of my head if there's any sort of like vector independence causal modeling work. I'm assuming it feels like something that should be around. I just haven't read in it. But yes. Robbie says, do you mean morpheme bound? It can't exist alone or independently. Oh, so like the distinction there would be the root versus the affixes. An affix must be bound to a root. So like inter in English has to be attached to something like interdependent, interstate. It's not a word on its own. Someone's going to find a citation of it being a word on its own, but generally it's not. Yes, that's a good example, right? So there's, you know, they have a grammatical relationship to each other that is not independent. If I see, you know, the word piece inter in an English text, I know I'm going to get something that goes with it. I know it has to have a root, so that has, you know, reduced the possibility of the things that I can have. And even if we're not talking about morphemes, right? Like in the sentence, I go to the that blank must be filled by something that is a place you can go to, right? Or is a location. So it's bounded to the things that we can fill that blank in with. And that's why we can train large language models. That's how they work, is because words are not independently, and you know, words don't have independence from each other. They have dependence on each other. And if they didn't, I mean, we wouldn't be able to communicate. What a system that would be if we always had just like the entropy would be either 1 or 0, and I can never remember which direction it goes. But the entropy would be either 1 or 0, and it would not be a useful way of encoding information. So, Jasper, hey, how's it going? Tom says inter or intra-national. Yeah, intra is also an affix in English. Yeah, we don't have quite as many affixes as other languages do. We also don't have a whole lot of infixes, which are affixes that have to go in between things, sometimes in a root. But yeah. All right. So this is a paper in AIN Society called Curmudgeon Corner by Jean Burgess. And Jean Burgess is pretty well known for doing platform studies. So if you're interested in sort of platforms like, say, Twitter, a good researcher to follow. And I thought that this little sort of think piece was particularly interesting, and I wanted to talk about, because it is something that I've been thinking about recently, particularly in my own work. And it is quite short. It's only like 2 pages. The title is Everyday Data Cultures Beyond Big Critique and the Technological Sublime by Jean Burgess. It was accepted May 22, and it came out in June. So it's been out for a little bit, but just something I've been thinking about. Sean says inter to bury, different word. Yes, I would say that those are not the same. They have the same, you know, etymological, I believe, origin, I would assume, but I would say that they are not the same I'm searching for it. I'm searching for the word in my head. It's not lexeme. It's not flutter. That's not it. You take things and you reduce them to their dictionary form. Stem? It's not stem. Lemma. Whew. Oh, it was flutter because there's a double letter in it. Thank you, brain. Thank you. Helpful. I probably wouldn't call it the same lemma. Some people may. Jasper says, wait, no, not synonym. Yeah. Lemma, L-E-M-M-A was the word I was looking for. So continuing to look at this paper, so a couple sections that I think are, the most relevant here are, so skipping the first paragraph. Yeah, lemma was what I meant, Lexi. Sorry, there's enough of a lag between you and me that sometimes you just have to watch me struggle. But reading now. Over the past decade, the field of critical data studies has emerged at the intersections of digital sociology, cultural studies, and internet studies to deal with the politics of datafication, as well as the forms of inequality and injustice that can result from data-driven automated decision-making and AI systems. So I would say people have been studying this since, before we started to use deep neural networks for everything, for things like, rule-based systems, for, resumes and things like that. Within computer science, these critiques have been mirrored by moves to address the technical aspects of the issues around data bias and algorithmic fairness, transparency, and explainability in AI. Fact, as it is sometimes known. Tom says lemur. No, not lemur. Not femur either. But more recently, the public conversation has taken a fairly sharp turn towards what we might call big critique. By this, we mean writing marked by a sense of urgency expressed in polemical terms, often promoting apparently novel conceptual frameworks that address large-scale, whole-of-society or whole-of-planet concerns, and set up principally against the unprecedented power of the world's biggest tech companies. See, for example, Crawford 2021, so that is Atlas of AI by Kate Crawford. She also wrote Weapons of Mass Destruction, I believe. One sec, let me make sure I'm not giving you the wrong citation. Jesper says, imagine getting a paper published for the phrase phallic spacecraft, the dream. Work in digital humanities. I was wrong. Kathy O'Neill wrote Weapons of Mass Destruction. Kate Crawford. Has she only written the one book? Maybe so. Anyway, so she is, she was at Microsoft at one point. One sec, what's her current affiliation? Yes, research professor at USC Annenberg and senior principal researcher at Microsoft Research, New York City, an honorary professor at the University of Sydney. So very active in the space. Research has been working on it for a long time. Very familiar with her work, although apparently wrong about the book she wrote. One risk with big critique is that it can end up amplifying popular myths about the power of technology. The most obvious example of this tendency is Shoshana Soshanna Zuboff's, Z-U-B-O-F-F, 2019 epic work, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. In the book, Zuboff, I'm assuming it's Zuboff, sounds the alarm about a new apparent form of capitalism that takes digital traces, or as Zuboff would have it, digital exhaust of our everyday life and converts them into predictive analytics and increasingly manipulative behavioral targeting. In her account, the tech companies appear all-powerful. Meanwhile, we ordinary citizens or consumers are cast as their unconscious subjects, and that is, of course, exactly how the agents of Zuboff's surveillance capitalism wants us to see it. Well, Zuboff's book, and I should say I haven't read this. I may have read a couple excerpts, but I don't think I've read the whole book. Well, Zuboff's book may be a polemical outlier. The narrative tropes it relies on have a long history, and they show up even in even the more apparently level-headed critiques of AI. Whether framed positively or negatively, the idea of revolutionary moments of technological change, from the railroad to electricity and the internet, is fundamental to the very idea of colonial nationhood in the US and elsewhere, including Australia. And I believe, yes, she is in Brisbane at Queensland University, so relevant because she is Australian. Indeed, the AI movement is the latest iteration of what David Nye, 96, calls the technological sublime, a cultural framework where AI-based technologies are destined to progress to awe-inspiring feats of innovation, floating free above race, gender, and sexuality. Technoculture's products are represented as quasi-magical, frictionless devices. In the US context, its white male CEOs, from Steve Jobs to Elon Musk, are like gods, phallic spacecraft and all, the term that Jesper was referring to. I'm just going to keep reading and then react. Big Critique heroically fights rhetorical fire with fire, revealing the dark toxicity at the heart of big tech. But in doing so, it plays into the quasi-religious tropes of the technological sublime, positioning technology at the center of moral battles between good and evil. And so, Big Critique's dominant framework of hype versus counter-hype primarily serves the interest of tech companies by connecting to a sense of drama and urgency around an always impending future tech revolution, and by acting as if AI was able to do what it claims to. If it does not escape this trap, even the most careful scholarly work that aims to respond critically to datification can end up centering the large technology companies and the state, leaving ordinary people out of the picture. So basically what she's saying here is that the sort of urgent critiques of... So I think that specific things that she's pointing out as patterns here are urgent language, moral language, so particularly around, ethics and fairness, accountability, and transparency. And I would say that this is almost like a discussion here is almost like Lacoffian Lakoff. I believe, one sec. I'm looking up a citation. I'm trying not to give you wrong citations. Lakoff and Johnson. So if you're familiar with the book Metaphors We Live By, it's an interesting read. I'd recommend it if you're sort of interested in language and thought, by George Lakoff and Mark Johnson. Part of the sort of idea there is framing, right? Like, how do you talk about a thing? What metaphors are you drawing? And so some of the things that she's objecting to here are framing, right? In particular, the march of progress narrative, I would say, or she talks about it, the technological sublime, right? This idea that like technology is always going to go up and better and it can do what it says it does. And I would say that I don't know that in particular the hype versus counter hype does necessarily, I think a lot of the people who are doing it, she's being a little bit unfair towards here. Specifically here, by acting as if AI is able to do what it claims to. I think a lot of, certainly in my network and the researchers that I interact with the most in this area, a lot of the counter hype is pointing out that these systems can't do what they're supposed to. So setting that aside, like, again, I think it's slightly unfair, but, she is not an AI practitioner, so I'm assuming that she is getting more of sort of the popular humanities version of this, and not as much necessarily the sort of pure practitioner discussion. Yeah. Jesper says, the surveillance capitalism book is coming up on my TikTok more and more. Maybe time to get it a read. Yeah. Tom says, feels sort of like techno-Marxism. I'm not super up on Marxist thought or literature, and I'm not... I think I've heard the term, but I'm not that familiar with it. Techno-Marxism. Marx has an M in it. I have not found, just off the top of my search, a good citation there. So yeah, if you want to expand on that, Tom, feel free. But Continuing to read here. Meanwhile, individuals, communities, and organizations of all kinds are going about their lives and work amid constant technological change, grappling with, anxious about, or simply uninterested in the possibilities, risks, and challenges of data and automation. Bearing the trap represented by the technological sublime in mind, I suggest we take heed of Sonia Livingstone's 2019 characterization of the present moment as a heady climate, one in which cautious calls to gather evidence about people's lives are easily missed in the urgent rush to describe our coming predicament. Tom says I made up the term. Gotcha. Well, I would also say that a lot of the people who are working in the in the field, I mean, I have a section on politics every week, right? Like, I'm definitely keeping an eye on laws and legislation, but also I understand that outside of the civil, we also have a social responsibility and exist as social creatures in the world. And then continuing to read, in everyday data cultures, my co-authors and I aim to contribute to this effort, right? So really talking about, and I believe that her background is more in digital ethnography. So digital ethnography, if you're familiar with ethnography, it's basically descriptions of ways of living, I guess would be one way to describe it in an anthropological framework. Digital ethnography is doing that for people's digital lives, right? So a self-digital ethnography, thing that you might do in class would be write down over the course of a day every website you visit and what you do there and what, your patterns of interaction with that site are and people are, and what it means to be a human doing the things that you're doing, basically. Yeah. Tom says, Marxism sort of assumes that there's a single cause for societal structure, in this case, big tech. It's often contrasted with structural pluralism that models stuff in terms of power balances between different groups. Yeah, so Marx had a explicitly class struggle framework. And I guess in this reading, the capitalists would be tech and the workers would be other companies, I guess. That probably doesn't make sense. Probably in a strict Marxist reading, the capitalists would be the venture capitalists, I'm guessing. Alexi says, anybody needs a machine learning engineer with 6+ years of experience looking for a job right now? Yeah, if anyone's looking. T-Prototype says, if every word is represented in the form of a vector, and which are different for every word, why do we need data annotation? Great question. So data annotation is not necessarily if you have sufficient information in the data that you have to do the task that you need to do, you don't need to do data annotation. Data annotation is necessary when the data you have does not have the structural richness that you need. So in a classic supervised learning example, you need the labels, right? And the words themselves are not the labels. The labels are things like positive movie review, negative movie review, toxic language, not toxic language. So the annotation adds that additional structure and information to the training data and the evaluation and testing data in order to make the problem more tractable. So not everything is an unsupervised problem or should be an unsupervised problem, and not everything not every problem can be treated as can be done using just unstructured text as input, basically. So that's the general idea. Annotation adds information. Yes, and so talking about the sort of digital ethnography work that they have done. And so you need to read, in the interaction between everyday life's mundane and meaning-making practices and the data operations of various kinds of AI, there are, as Raymond William might have put it, resources of hope for more inclusive, creative, and ethical AI futures. Resources that can be put to good use by social enterprise, community organizations, artists, and even academics in practical initiatives that are quietly grounded in everyday practice, experiences, practices, and needs beyond the heroics of big critique. So I thought this was particularly interesting because generally when folks who are critiquing, ML stuff get pushback, it's often from people working on the ML stuff. And I think this is I appreciate some of her points. I don't know that all of her criticism is entirely fair. I will say I have not read, like I said, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, and I haven't read The Atlas of AI either. But I am sort of familiar with academic work in the setting. And a lot of the work is, you know, pointing out potential harms or existing harms. And for me, I think one of the more important things is, you know, in this field, I mean, is what we're doing here. As practitioners, as people who are doing the technology making, understanding what we're looking at, understanding what can go wrong, and trying to mitigate it. And for me, you know, again, I'm not an academic. I was at one point, but I'm not anymore. I think that the most impactful thing that we can do in the ML space is to be thoughtful and be aware and be educated and continue to educate ourselves. Like we were talking today, right, about words not being independently distributed. That's something that's going to affect everything, right? We were talking today about, you know, even non-lexical features are going to have social information in them, are going to have potentially prosodic information in them. So knowing about the benefits and limitations of the systems. So yeah, I thought it's an interesting thread to bring in, an interesting sort of thing to bring up. And it is, there's definitely a lot of sensationalism in the machine learning field and discussion of machine learning, both pro and anti. So I, especially as someone who it sounds like is a little bit like to the side of the field, but still has a lot of ties to it, I can definitely understand the frustration. So. Yeah. Alexi says the difference of between P of A given B and P of A and B. Yep. Tom says, I never quite know what ethnography means. I think sort of anthropology based on artifacts like text rather than actually talking to people. Usually ethnographers do talk to people. Yes, so I would say that ethnography does involve generally conversations with people. Professional reflexivity. Alexi says, good news, no longer working on the psychiatrist AI. Not going to be on your enemy list for a while. I mean, I'm not the boss of you. I just don't think it's a good idea, and we talked about why. All right, next up. So another sort of a lot of digital humanities papers this week. It just sort of worked out that way. So this is from October 27th, and it is in Pervasive and Mobile Computing. And the article is titled, Do Smart Speaker Skills Support Diverse Audiences? By Hassan Shafi, S-H-A-F-E-I, and Chiu Tan, C-H-I-U, Tan, whose affiliations are Temple University in Philadelphia and Jazan University in Saudi Arabia. I do like that these last two papers have like said when they got the paper and then when it was revised and when it was accepted, etc. So it was received April 2022 and made available online October 2022. So yeah. Yeah. So yeah, let's just read the abstract. I thought it was particularly interesting because obviously maybe not obviously, I have a background in automatic speech recognition. It's one of the things I worked on in my dissertation. And also I, previously was at a chatbot company, and smart speaker skills are one of the things we thought a lot about. Yeah, and we talked last week as well about the new privacy first smart speaker from Mycroft AI. So it's also been on my radar a little bit. All right, so abstract. Smart speakers with voice assistants like Google Home or Amazon Alexa are increasingly popular and essential in our daily lives due to the convenience of issuing voice commands. I don't have one and I get by fine, but they are popular. Tom says, lol, journal shaming. Honestly, that is not a horrible turnaround. What is that? 7 months. I think the longest I ever sat on a paper was 2 years while I was waiting for feedback, and then they rejected it. So that felt good. Ensuring that these voice assistants are equitable to different population subgroups is critical. In this framework paper, we present the first framework, Audio AC, like accuracy, ACC, to help evaluate the performance of various accents. Audio AC takes videos from YouTube and generates composite commands. We further propose a new metric called consistency of results that developers can be used to avoid incorrect translation of the produced results by rewriting the skill to improve the word error rate performance. Although I will say that the rewriting of the skill is going to be based on these generated composite commands, so potentially it might be a confound there because that's artificial data. We evaluate Audio AC on complete sentences extracted from YouTube videos. The results reveal that our composite sentences generated by Audio AC are close to complete sentences. Our evaluation of diverse audiences shows that first, speech from native speakers, particularly Americans, exhibits the best word error rate performance by 9.5 in comparison from other native and non-native speakers, which, no surprise, at least to me, that is very consistent with the existing literature. Second, speech from American professional speakers has significantly more fairness and the best word error rate performance by 8.3% compared to speech from German professional speakers and German and American amateur speakers. Oh, so I thought that that was like a class thing, like people from a professional class, but what they mean here is voice actors, I'm guessing. Moreover, we show that the COR metric could help developers to rewrite their skills to improve the word error rate accuracy. Okay, so the word error rate. So that shouldn't be too, they're using language models, so I think there might be an effect there, which we use to improve the accuracy of the Russian accent. There you go, Alexi. Yeah. Robbie says, nowadays people make prank videos with Alexa and Google Assistant. Oh, I don't think I've seen any of those. Interesting. Question, what's the difference between ethnography and anthropology? So anthropology is a field of study, the study of humans, and ethnography is an activity done by anthropologists predominantly. So it would be like linguistics and drawing parse trees, right? So, well, not parse, but drawing syntactic trees. Linguistics is a field of study. Drawing syntactic trees is a scholarly activity taken on by linguists. Yeah. Alexi says there's a group of people in Yakutia, apologies if I'm saying that incorrectly, Russia, who have a mixture of Old Russian and native people, a unique language with almost no written text. The people are going to be gone in our lifetime. They don't have a distinct ethnic group, but a super unique culture. Interesting. That is sad about the this language time. So I was wrong then. Sorry. Oh, it's perfectly fine. If you've never studied anthropology, how could you possibly know? Yeah. And just gonna, can I open the figures? Nope. Anyway. Interesting paper, more fuel for the fire that, hey, excuse me, native speakers from America get the best speech recognition technology. That's fair. That's great. It's not great. It's not fair, and I don't love it. And also that apparently being a professional voice actor seems to improve your results, which suggests to me bias in the training data. Also could potentially be a helpful testing set for some of you. But yep. Oop, that's the wrong link. One sec, let me get the right link. Well, I guess we can just go through it together. The paper is from the International Journal of Communication, and it came out November 1st, so very, very recent. Also on smart speakers, because I thought it'd be nice to have a little bit of a theme, and it is hell to read. We're in purgatory together. All right. There's so much dang gruff on this webpage. So the paper is in the International Journal of Communication. It is Colonizing the Home as Data Source, Investigating the Language of Amazon Skills and Google Actions by Louise Marie Hurel? H-U-R-E-L? Hurel. Could be Dutch. I don't know. And Nick Coudry, Couldry, Couldry. Those are both names with a lot of potential pronunciations. Wouldn't it be nice if English was just like phonetic and good? Wouldn't give me that much information from other names from other languages that weren't transliterated, though, so maybe it doesn't actually make that much difference. Anyway, multiple domains, reading the abstract here, of life and everyday routine interactions have been targeted as key shapes for shaping individuals' behavior according to companies' data extractive expectations. One sec. That's right. Expectations, in particular the home. The introduction of digital personal assistants such as Alexa and Google Assistant have been one of the ways through which companies have sought to push the frontiers of data extraction into the most private and intimate spaces of everyday life. In this article, we look at how the home has been positioned as a space for data extraction through Amazon Skills and Google Actions, programmable apps within the DPA. Digital personal assistant. Or smart speaker. We conducted a thematic analysis of documents from both companies and present different dimensions through which the home is opened up for data extraction, a process we call data colonialization of the home. So it sounds like this is going to be quite similar in theme to the, nope, this one, yes. The Age of Surveillance Capitalism book that we talked about previously. Yeah. Alexi says, I still have a dream of making a smart speaker for my grandma in her native language before she's gone. To this day, she cannot use a feature phone. It would be cool to have a radio that she's familiar with to talk to and make calls to her friends and relatives. And remind her to do stuff and play something at vocal requests because she cannot type. Yeah, that is one of the things that, especially voice bots, have this great potential to increase access for people, which is one of the things I think is particularly useful and valuable about them. But yeah. Maybe that Mycroft machine could work for you. If you can get it shipped. I don't know. It might be difficult to get like the physical machine. But so I think this is an interesting framework to think about. What is it that smart speakers are getting from the people who are using them? So the sort of general framework that they have here, I thought I had another figure further down. Rachel, this paper is really long and has a lot of text. Yep. Welcome to the humanities. Social science, I guess, perhaps. Yeah, so actually let's just go through and read each of the headings and each of the things that they talk about. I think that's just going to be the most useful way to summarize this text. This is not automatic summarization. This is laborious by hand summarization. Well, yes, so the framework distinguishes three main ways of capturing the complexity of Amazon Echo and Google Nest Home's practice. Mapping, understood in two specific ways via modalities of use and varieties of input language, interface, and authorizing language. Modalities refers to the different ways in which the data is continually extracted and made available as a resource, automated, voluntary, third-party sharing. Input knowledges describe the different data sources that feed into the operationalization of DPA's extractive practices, whether direct input of personal data or background data sources such as health and wellness information acquired by third-party companies, or given smart speaker capabilities, deduced via biometric signals by the speakers themselves. Interface focuses on how DPA's socio-technical functionality operates within everyday life. For example, routines within Amazon Echo's functionalities, which enable the user to accept Alexa's recommendations to combine multiple acts in a sequence. Finally, authorizing language refers to the discourses that seek to sustain data extractive practices for, by example, evoking customers' moral concerns for technology that is respectful of privacy at home. So let's talk about, I think the thing that's probably going to be most relevant for us as technologists is the bit at the end where they talk about authorizing language, right? So they've talked about all the different ways in which this information is extracted and used, and how do they get people to do it, right? Machine learning in any case requires for its effective functioning an ever-expanding set of training data, given our current methods. A number of skills pick up on this to justify their use of data from user interactions, linking in turn to the supposed expanded learning of the user. Consider the My Pregnancy skill. Hear helpful tips, see incredible fetal development images, count down the weeks and days to your baby's birth, and learn what to expect as your baby grows and your body changes. All this in exchange for the extremely valuable information of this person's having a baby and can be sold baby stuff. Meanwhile, developers are told by Amazon that their learning as developers is enhanced by devising skills more effectively. You'll learn guidelines on how to create effective voice interactions, as well as some specific rules to keep Alexa in mind as designing your skills. Amazon here depicts something like a virtuous circle. External web services accessed by the skill or action are part of the circle, right? So, I think most people like learning. They would consider that a virtue, and it's being phrased as like, we are learning and you are learning, and not necessarily what we are learning is specifically data about you. Discussion of Marxism versus structural pluralism in the comments. Hey, old player, and Gohaku again. Meow. Home security is one obvious line of expansions for smart speaker services, and Google's language is particularly interesting here. Google in its Nest guides justifies its use of home cameras in conventional terms. Devices like Nest Cam use video to help you keep an eye on your home and alert you when things happen, even when you're not there. We talked last week about, how Alexa cameras and their alerts have led to the people who receive those alerts doing violence, not necessarily causally, but certainly as a factor. But Google expands the conventional language to suggest that its range of sensors enable the home to take care of the user. Data from these sensors, which is regularly sent to Google, serve a variety of purposes, such as helping your home take better care of you, helping us make your devices and services better, and keeping you informed. The language of care is therefore also a language of trust building, where technology is framed as familiar, careful, and safe enough to share the most private spaces and relationships in users' lives, and so serve or inform them better, which I am skeptical about as, certified paranoid weirdo, as we've talked about before. So, concurrently with its expressing care for users and having the data system enact that care, Google, like Amazon, recognizes certain limits to its authority to operate in the home, which remains legally a private space, despite its profound saturation with external data extraction technology. I will also say, depending on what state you are in and party recording consent laws, if your smart speaker records someone who does not know or consent to being recorded, you potentially could be in hot water about it. So keep that in mind if you are using these technologies. The Google Actions Guide to Conversational Actions imposes certain constraints on developers which, in effect, outline how Google understands the limits to its authority in the home. Actions that expose users to sexual conduct are, for example, outlawed, and so too many other types of inappropriate content. And of course, who decides what's inappropriate? It's Google. There's not really that many laws around this. For more technical reasons, actions that gather, quote, personal medical information or financial data in violation of applicable legal obligations are outlined by Google. Many of these restrictions appear to be Google's insurance policy against actions that later prove legally risky for them. For example, infringing third-party IP rights or making misleading or deceptive claims. Some of the restrictions reflect Google's broader assessment to its risk environment. For example, Google outlawing actions that permit peer-to-peer money transfers, right? So yeah, it's interesting to think about the relationship of the users, the developers who are developing skills for those users, and then the companies who are allowing for that interaction to happen and benefiting from it. Anyway, I don't want to read this whole paper. I'll pop the link in the chat if you're interested. I think it's just a helpful framework and good to think about you know, how do we convince people to give us their data, right? And when we get it, are we getting only what we need? Are we being careful with it? Are we upholding, you know, the things that we tell users, like care and safety and privacy? Or are we perhaps intentionally or unintentionally misleading users? So things to think about as developers, particularly if, you know, you're developing Alexa skills and you don't have an Alexa. How is Alexa being framed as a product when it's provided to these people, the customers? So yeah. T-Prototype says, does data annotation consist of giving the target column value Y, like sentiment of tweets, to prepare the training data or not? It can. It can be, you know, the way that you do data annotation in language data, it can either be at the sort of the phrase level or the text or the span level, so something like sentiment, or it could be, you know, highlighting parts of the text for things like named entity recognition, being like, this text span is where the named entity is, and this is what that entity is. So, yeah. Robbie says, colonization is the nature of humans. I really don't think that's the case. I think that we live in a world where almost every society has been deeply touched by colonization. But I don't think that that is inherent or natural to being a human. I think that is a reflection of geopolitical histories. And yeah, I refuse to accept colonialism as natural or inherent. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Jesper. Jesper says, I've never been so happy to be wearing headphones. My Alexa would be having a field day. Apologies. Yep. Yep. More discussion of Marxism in the comments. Hey, old player. All right. Next up. Oh, so this is a master's paper. And I don't always talk about student work, but yeah, I thought this one was particularly interesting. So it's on the semantic derogation of female. So this is, I would probably put that in quotes, it's the word female, by Andrew Furley at York University, York University, under the supervision of Ruth King, Masters of Arts in Linguistics and Applied Linguistics. So, yeah. So I just thought it was a particularly interesting paper, and basically it's quite long. So including citations, it is 54 pages, which is, yeah, I would say that's fairly, you know, citations and appendices, excuse me. So I'd say that's, you know, not particularly unusual for a master's final paper. But I thought it was a particularly interesting study looking at usage online. So the one of the things that we talk about in particularly in pragmatics, so pragmatics is, you know, meaning and context, social meaning beyond the pure semantics of the word, is connotation and denotation. So connotation would be, the example here, freedom fighter versus terrorist. So freedom fighter has a positive connotation, terrorist has a negative connotation. And words can acquire positive or negative connotations over time. So for a historical pattern that's gone on certainly in English is that words associated with women have undergone semantic derogation, so they have acquired a negative connotation. So for example, lady, if someone was rude to me in the supermarket, I might be like, watch it, lady. But it would be very weird to say something like, watch it, gentleman. I'd probably be like, watch it, dude, if I was being like, you know, upset with them. But these words were, you know, a matched pair at one point. And so this master's paper is about specifically the word females as a way to talk about women. Here he's referencing the Ferengi from Star Trek, which are a hyper-capitalistic and also very sexist alien race, and refer to all women as females, using sort of like a weird prosody, like females. if you're familiar with the shows, then you know what I'm talking about. And if you're not, hopefully you have enough understanding and background to get it. Yeah. And the sort of research question in here is like, okay, so this is sort of a general pattern of people reacting to discussions in this way, you know, and then there was also this is an open question. So people are talking about this online, and it's this sort of within a specific internet community in a specific context. This is a clear understanding of this word, but does it more generally apply? So there were, you know, it started by asking just around people of their acquaintance, is this also something that you believe in general? And it seems to be pretty strongly that if somebody refers to women as females, you know, potentially they are being derogatory towards women, which I would say definitely agrees with my general experience of the usage of the term. And then there was some qualitative analysis that were done previous to this work on the pickup artist community, an artist community that is very derogatory towards women, I would say. Not a great place to be, you know, to be if you are a woman. And the terminology that's being used in this paper is conspicuous female, so the use of the word female conspicuously. Reading here, specifically, I characterize that it's a lexical variant for women, which, when it occurs outside of clinical context, seems to carry ideological baggage. To this end, I approached the question from a different direction than my earlier project, which was small in scale and purely qualitative in analysis. First, I re-administered an earlier survey on attitudes towards this lexical variant with a larger sample and wider age range. Secondly, I made use of Twitter keyword searches for regionally large corpus of text containing the targeted variant female and variant which is less negatively charged woman. And that aligns with my expectations as well. Woman and female, to me, have different connotations. The Twitter data analyzed are analyzed using critical discourse analysis for content which indexes prejudicial ideologies as well as quantitative variationalist methodology. So critical discourse analysis is a field of linguistics that I know very little about. I think I've read like 2 papers on it ever. I know people who work in it, but that's about as far as I've gotten. But basically you look at discourse, dialogue, and annotate it critically. And then quantitative variationist sociolinguistics is a field that I worked in, basically counting things. And one of those things includes a social context, and another of those things includes a linguistic thing. And that's it. That's the thing. All right, so let's just look at some of the results, which I believe are in line. Scroll. I'm looking for a graph. The Twitter data. Okay, yep, should be under here. Exclusion, so things that were gotten rid of. That makes sense. Results. Is there a graph? Here we go. So here are the like art is 2. Okay, so the scale down here is people's like rating of this. So a 3 is neutral, 1 is, I believe, very negative, and 5, I believe, is very positive. So most people said this was neutral to positive. There's a positive bias in more sort of like scalar questions. So to me, this is sort of a good baseline, and this is for the phrase, I recognize those women, pretty neutral. However, survey results for I recognize those females, overwhelmingly negative. So 63% of the respondents said that it was very negative, and only 5% of the respondents said that it was very positive. So just looking at these 2 graphs, you can see that females seems to have a much stronger negative connotation than women does. Which nice to have survey results for that. Definitely agrees with my sort of general vibe and work I've done on it previously. Tom says, what does inline results mean? Oh, that like here, that they're just being in line with the rest of the text. So here being that the discussion of the results is in the rest of the text, as opposed to being pulled out in a figure or a table. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. So that's that paper, which I thought was just like, sometimes it's nice to have a fun, lighthearted linguistics paper. And then the final thing, it's not really a paper, it's an ongoing research project, I believe, by Amber Sinha, who I believe is currently at Mozilla, is a Mozilla fellow. And it is a research project, I should say what it's called, Knowing Without Seeing. Tofik says, why? Why? What? I'm gonna need a little bit more context. I'm not like exactly synced for the chat, so I would need to know what you were asking why about. Oswu says the results are based on a Twitter survey. I believe the data collection was done on Twitter, and the I don't believe the survey was run on Twitter, and I don't believe that because you can only have 4 options on a survey. So let's see. Let's see. The attitudinal survey would be section 3.1. Penny Eckert. Sorry, I just saw a citation to somebody I know. Darcy, yeah, that makes sense. Alex Darcy. Likert scales, yes. How is the citation done? How is the data elicitation done, rather? Data collection. Okay, not entirely sure where the survey was run. We could probably dig through the paper for it, but I have not found it on a quick... Here, let me do this. Quick thing. What if I go to the top? The first time it's discussed. Google Forms was how the data was collected. So, question. Oh, the question is why female is negative. Good question. It is being used by people in a negative context, right? So yeah, the general sort of pattern of words like this developing a strongly negative context that male doesn't have quite to the same degree is that people who are do not feel positively towards the group they were referring to use a specific term to refer towards that group, and it gains a negative connotation because of the social situation. Yeah. So just change in discussion, in use. Oh, interesting. So it sounds like Alexi makes a distinction between female being sex and woman being gender, perhaps. Same for male and men. Interesting. I would say that that's not... I'm sure there are other people who also have that usage, but I'd say that's not my usage in general. But yes, and also a good point from Tom is that female does not, you can be a female of any species. It doesn't mean that you are a human, you know? Yeah. Yeah, so hopefully that answered your question, OSW, about the survey data. Anyway, project on it. There are some essays and blog posts and also resources here that I think would be particularly helpful, especially this annotated bibliography. And the general idea of this research project, which is ongoing, and I'm just sharing here because I thought it might be helpful for some of you, is how do we get explainability from an algorithm, right, or a model where we don't necessarily have or can't necessarily give our users access to all of the information, right? So a great example of this type of thing is how do we tell somebody why their tweet was tagged as toxic, for example, without telling people who are trying to subvert the toxicity filter exact details of how to do that, right? And how do we help people understand what's going on as our primary objective? So that's the idea. Yeah. Tom says, I prefer my just so story to your empiricism. that is what it is to have a degree in linguistics, unfortunately. That is, I signed up for it. No. What's my opinion on Elon Musk owning Twitter? He doesn't have a great history of being in charge of things that then continue to thrive and grow, so not delighted, I would say. I am, for those of you who follow me on Twitter, I'm still probably going to be on Twitter until I find it to be unusable, but I'm also on Mastodon at RCTATMAN, and actually I can post my Mastodon thing in here if you are interested. Why don't people don't accept the scientific fact? Well, I mean, I'm not entirely sure if you're interested in sort of discussion about gender versus sexuality, in which case I would say a lot of people don't like to question norms or, you know, examine them. But if the sort of question is like, why does that happen in linguistics in particular? Because everybody uses language, and we all love to tell stories about language, but some of those stories, unfortunately, do not align with the evidence that we have available to us. So, yeah. Yeah, Mastodon gang. I know I saw you followed me, Jasper, so good to see you on here as well. I don't think that Elon can buy Mastodon. It is a nonprofit. Also, you know, you may be able to tell from my name, I own my Mastodon instance and I run it. So I would have to stop running it for it to go away. All right, next up is the professional stuff. So this is just things that might affect you in your day-to-day work. The first one, this is a Vice article, and I don't really especially want to go into it. I'm assuming most of you are familiar with machine learning explainability, but what I think is particularly interesting, so this came out November 1st of this year. It is by Chloe Xiang, and the title is Scientists Increasingly Can't Explain How AI Works. AI researchers are warning developers to focus more on how and why a system produces certain results than the fact that the system can accurately and rapidly produce them. And I think the interesting thing here is that AI explainability is a thing that Vice is writing about, right? So this is definitely something that's in the popular zeitgeist that people are aware of. Alexi says, these norms are not norms. People were like this since forever. If we are referring to gender and sexuality, I would question A, when forever begins for you, and B, which people you are talking about specifically, because gender is a cultural construct. A great example of that I think is, you know, sometimes helpful for folks is that the idea that pink is for girls and blue is for boys, right? That is a cultural construct. And as recently as I think the 1910s, it was flipped, where blue is for girls and pink was for boys, because pink was considered a more virile color because it's like skin and blood, I guess. Yes, so I know we've talked a lot about anthropology today, but this is a great example of something that is culturally defined. Period, right? It comes from your culture and your cultural identity. Yes, and also, you know, also not a great representation of the biological complexity of human sex expression, which is not quite so cut and dried as a lot of people like to believe. So, yeah. Anyway. People know about explainability. They're probably going to start asking for it. Probably something that we as a field should keep an eye on, because if it becomes a strong consumer demand, we should provide it. Yeah. Jesper says heels were for men as well. Yes, they were for writing. Gotcha. So Alexi says people were exhibiting a huge spectrum of gender and sexuality since being a human. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Definitely agree. All right. Also, related to this, I thought this was a particularly interesting, so we talked about, you know, in order. See how well I organized these? It's like a little thought. So we talked about this research project that's ongoing about providing transparency solutions for things that are inherently opaque or that we want to keep opaque for security or privacy reasons. We know that people are going to start asking for it. And I think this is a particularly related piece. It is by Chelsea Troy, that's ChelseA. It was published on August 19th of this year, so a little bit older. And it is, what should we be asking about machine learning studies? So I believe she's at Mozilla. Yes, staff engineer at Mozilla, working on data integrity and model integrity at scale. So a lot of the things that she is discussing here, being a straight man or a woman is a weird modern construct. Yeah, I mean, also, I would also say that gayness as a thing is also kind of a modern construct. I am not saying that. Slight aside, we're going back to anthropology land. Something that a lot of folks in the queer community can get upset about is, especially like anthropologists who describe, hey, these two people, they were very close, they were buried together, as at that time, other spouses were, and people would be like, just say they're gay. Well, we can't. That is not how they would have described themselves as their point in time, right? And it's more important that we accurately understand, to the degree that it is possible, what the self-concept of people was in the past, rather than projecting our ideas onto them, right? So just as an aside. Also, we did lose a lot of historical research about gender and sexuality due to Nazis, very unfortunately. Anyway, so interesting discussion here. So one thing that she brings up that is generally not the way that people talk about it is that industry researchers, to quote, may have a less perverse incentive structure, specifically when it comes to study integrity, because the idea is that academic researchers want to get a lot of machine learning papers out, but they don't really have to build and maintain systems that continue to work at scale, whereas companies do. So companies are motivated to fund research by that. But that is a pretty big change, right? So from 2008 to 2009, to pick some years, these are all before 2010. I don't know why I picked that as a year when there was a sea change, but I did, and it looks like Chelsea did as well. Oh, can I share the link? For sure. I copied one dash from it, which would have been horrible. Tom Wright says, what's the equivalent of self-concept for a group of people? Social identity. Asu says, isn't it easier for humans from the present age to understand if the language from the present is used? Yes, if it's accurate, right? I think it is. I mean, I am a armchair enjoyer of anthropology, and I think that we, as people in a time, just as people in a culture, have a hard time understanding how different our worldview and, priorities and thought processes are from people in the past, right? So a great example here is clothing, right? Up until, both my grandmas made most of the clothing for their family by hand, and my great-grandmas would also have done, they probably would have also done the majority of the spinning, and my great-great-grandmas would have done, the spinning, the weaving, the dyeing. Well, they may have offloaded some of it, depending on who had access to looms, etc. I said both. They continue to go up in number. And the production of fabric was the thing that the majority of women, certainly in Western Europe, spent the majority of their time doing up until the very, very recent past. Or, the access and accessibility of light, right? That has dramatically changed our lives and our values. This is a great example. So I think as modern humans, certainly, in my cultural context, if I look at a circle, like in a geographic location, my instinct, my gut instinct, is that the important part of the circle is going to be in the middle, whereas, you know, we have some archaeological evidence that for prehistoric peoples, again in the Western European context, that's what I'm most interested in, because that's A, that stuff's all in English, and B, that's also, you know, my heritage. The boundaries of the circle are the important part. The middle of the circle is not the important part, which is, you know, just such a conceptual difference from our current sort of modern understanding of things. I think anthropology is really interesting. I didn't actually give you the link, sorry. Yeah. Anyway, we were looking at this figure. So the figure is from the Mozilla Internet Health Report, which we talked about a while ago, and author affiliations and highly cited papers over 10 years. So this is not all papers, these are the papers that people talk about. And in 2008 to 2009, about, I don't know what I'd call that, 10% had big tech affiliations. About another maybe 5% had other corporate affiliations, and the vast majority had no corporate affiliations. So this would both be governmental researchers, because the history of NLP in the United States is deeply tied to the US government and military-industrial complex, and university researchers. However, if we look at in 2018 to 2019, about half of the researchers had a big tech affiliation, about less than half had no corporate affiliation, and there were a small slice of people who had other corporate affiliations. So more of the work is being done by big tech affiliated researchers than was previously. However, this does come with some issues, one of which is what we value as a field. So this again is from the Mozilla Internet Health Report. I don't know how to read that first letter. Kata says, how tall am I? I'm 5'5", I think, inish there. It's been a while since I measured myself. Yeah. Obviously, if you go even deeper in history, Homo erectus became Homo sapiens and lived in Ethiopia. Yes. Yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad you found that interesting, Asu. Anyway, I think, I don't know, I think a lot about my place both in society and also in time, and like the specific time. And maybe partially that's climate anxiety, you know. But not entirely. Also just sort of like, I don't know. History is interesting. Anyway, so what are valued in machine learning research papers? In this survey of machine learning papers, 1.2% valued ethical principles, 1.7% valued user rights, and the rest of them all valued technical performance. So things like, did number go down, which, also speaking from experience, much easier to get a number went down or number went up paper published than a paper on rights or ethics, or that incorporates rights and ethics as the thing that you built the system to do. So, yep. And a point that Chelsea makes here is this isn't just an ethics thing. Data integrity is, and we would continue to do well to treat and discuss it as a performance consideration. Science is cumulative, so we hamstring ourselves as an industry by building on top of shoddy work. It's not just use actual correct statistics in your statistics because it's morally superior. It's also literally our job, not a noble ambition, but table stakes, which I would agree. In general, you know, we talk about it a lot. It's good to be ethical, but also if you're not ethical, the things that you build are not going to work well for everybody. That's not great. So anyway, I posted the link so you can all look at the information if you like. I think it's a pretty good discussion and well contextualized, and again written from a practitioner perspective, which a lot of the stuff we read is written more from an academic perspective. Yeah. Tom says, I think theory is missing here. So I think the as like a justification for the thing. Yeah, so we probably have to look at more like information on how they coded it, but I mean, I look over publication records for lots of the major conferences on occasion to find things that I'd be interested in reading. And I would say that, you know, most of the papers are about, you know, and it could be for theoretical reasons, but we made number go down or up. So, Dana says, I submitted a workshop paper auditing BERT for bias and zero-stop learning, got rejected because the work wasn't innovative and for no other reason. AI researchers don't seem to care about ethics. Yeah, not everybody, but it is a little bit of an uphill battle, unfortunately. Yeah. Chelsea Troy, just search that. Yeah, and I did do the link as well. Hi, my name is Blackheart, by the way. I didn't say that that's who I was responding to there. All right, next up. So this is just, I thought it might be helpful for some of you. We've talked about corpus linguistics quite a bit and things about, you know, the general gist of counting words. And there is a new book out, Fundamental Principles of Corpus Linguistics by Tony McEnery, M-C-E-N-E-R-Y, and Vaclav Brezhnev from Cambridge University Press. So if you're interested in learning more about corpus linguistics in particular, I think that would be a helpful thing. Oh, are you asking for the link for the Chelsea Troy piece? Yeah, I posted it a while ago, but also put that in chat for you. Also, if I haven't done them for today yet, but I will by the end of the day, my coffee, there we go. My coffee is down there, and all my monthly coffee supporters get all the links that we talk about every week. So if you're interested in a more compact format, you can support me on coffee. All right. Also in the, I don't know, scuttlebutt / professional interest realm, Explosion, which is the company that built and maintains Spacey, as well as Prodigy and some other things, has sold 5% of the company. So they're sort of talking about why they did that. Signalfire made an investment of $6 million into the company in return for 5% of the company and warrants that will allow them to invest a further $12 million at the same price. Somebody joined the board. The funds are going to be used to finish the next project, Prodigy Teams. And if one thing that they're just very transparent about is who owns the company. So if we sort of look at it, Matthew Hannibal owns about half, Inès Montenay, who we've talked about a lot, owns about a third, the employees own about 10%, and then Signalfire now owns 7.7%, because of course they, you know, had an option to buy more of the company, and looks like they exercised it. And one of the discussions that they talked about, open source companies that are trying to make money it's challenging, right? Because you're building something in collaboration with other people that is fundamentally free to use. So how do you get people to give you money? And also you're using the labor of your community. So there is, you know, an expectation of sort of a reciprocal relationship there. And one of the things that they're very aware of in this, I thought I had a sock stuck to my shoulder, but it's just a little hoodie tie, is that they want to make sure that they are maintaining control of the company so that they continue to be able to help users in the way that they have become accustomed to. So another thing, which I thought was particularly interesting, is that they included what's now known as a Weinstein Clause, a contract representation that would help push the worst actors out of the industry if widely adopted. And most importantly, we haven't promised any timeline for an exit or further investment. Our goal is to run a stable and profitable company. So I thought it was very transparent. And I appreciate that they have sort of contractual protections for both themselves and their users, which were pretty cool. Yeah. All right. Oh. Gohaki says, I hope the textbook is affordable. Oh, the Corpus Linguistics textbook? Yeah. I hope so. If the price is on this website, it is not shown. Although I will say, if you are particularly interested in it and perhaps would have trouble affording it, you may reach out to the authors and see if they might be able to help you out. Oftentimes, you know, professors can do that. Usually it's a little bit more common with you know, chapters of books and whole books. So if there's a specific chapter and you're like, hey, could I have a copy of this chapter for these reasons, they might be amenable. No. Worth checking it out. All right. Yeah. Tom says, step 1, get funding. Step 2, get users. Step 3, get bought by Microsoft. Yes. Certainly a pattern that occurs. So the next thing is from Deep Learning AI, which is, I guess it's a company. I think Andrew Ng is related to them, founded them, perhaps. I'm not entirely sure of the relationship there. I just know that there is one. And it was a discussion of sort of AI horror stories. It was sort of Halloween theme. Okay, yeah, so this was written by Andrew. And the sort of different stories that were covered were, of course, you know, the idea that like, ooh, it's self-aware, which does not, you know, align with most researchers and practitioners' understanding. That, you know, GPUs may completely go away, which that problem seems to be more or less fixed for the moment, but, you know, question mark for the future. Automated systems, managing hiring processes, and the sort of discussion here is, you know, that if companies do use them, they generally do keep humans in the loop, which is pretty good. Also discusses the 2023 thing that we talked about, that New York City passed to inform people if automated hiring decisions are made, and then sort of foundation models. Large language models is what everybody else calls them, except for the Stanford people and some of the Berkeley people. And then this one has, it seems like, actually happened a couple of times where people, you know, using deepfakes to pretend that they're working remotely when they're in fact not who they said they were. So, yep. Anyway, I thought it was just sort of an interesting breakdown of some different sort of horror stories and nice collection of articles on them. So, yeah. Tom says the book is affordable. Okay, hopefully you're being not being facetious. You know, I don't usually watch people because they're not quite as educated. An argument could be made that I'm too educated. I should have stopped, but thank you. Yes, I would agree that that is has had a lot of education is a true thing about me. Jasper says, step 1, have a good idea, get users, get copied by Instagram. Alexi says, I still can't find the thread. What's the creepiest thing you found in your data set? Yeah, let me know if you find it. All right, next up. And this is just a good so you know it. The GPT-2 vocabulary, sorry, this is a tweet from Joe Harvey, Z-O-U-H-A-R-V-I, a PhD at Zurich. This is a university, I believe, and not that company that tries to sell people crypto. And talking about some of the subwords. So one of them is, you know, -man, one of them is -ian, and one of them is this just wild mojibaki. So this is, well, it's not mojibaki because the font's rendering, but, you know, the result of an encoding error, let me put it this way. So there's a little, hard to see here, but some terminal output that has this example and looks like it has a couple thousand examples in the training data. Other things are G challenges, where the G has a little diacritic on it, G atom, so various coding errors and issues, which not surprising if you're familiar with sort of how the GPT data was collected. Yes. And then some other examples of subword tokens that I think most people would agree are not subword tokens. And some of these look like they might be encoding examples, and some of these look like they might actually just be, you know, ASCII art or something else non-linguistic. So be warned, the data in GPT-3 and 2 is not very clean, which I don't think is a surprise to anyone, but it's nice to have an example of that. So, yes, Jesper says it's a pretty significant Swiss university, Zurich. Yeah. Bye, Tom. Thanks for joining. It's been 2 hours. I'm less than halfway through. Yes, shoot. So the next thing that I want to talk about is a piece from Scientific America on open software. Just sort of talking about the benefits of open software and how it makes it easier to analyze data and collaborate with other researchers, which I would agree. You know, when I was predominantly doing research, open software really changed my life, right? It's how I got into R, it's how I got into Python, it's how I was able to transition into NLP without being part of a lab that had a MATLAB license. MATLAB. For those of you who are not familiar, MATLAB is a proprietary programming language, and it is expensive. I think it was $200 a year for a student to use it. Last time I had a chance to check, but yes. So yeah, just a nice piece on the utility of open software for science. I don't know. I've been doing a lot of thinking about open source in machine learning and the community and society in general, and when it can be good and when it can be harmful. I don't know, maybe I'll do a deep dive on it, because I've been thinking on it for a little bit and ruminating on it, and I think I'm starting to get some thoughts that I'd like to share and get some feedback on. So Jester says it's been a long day. Yes it has. Also, this seems really cool. So I believe this is a Hugging Face thing. It is a Big Code project. And they have just released the Stack, 3 terabyte data set of permissively licensed data code in 30 programming languages. And you are able to opt out as well, which is particularly interesting. So if you're interested in building sort of a Copilot replacement that you probably can do legally, and only using data that it seems like probably is licensed in a way that lets you do that, this may be a good data set to use. So yeah. Robbie says, I prefer open source. I do in general, but I don't think it's an inherent good. Let me put it that way. And I am ready to get flamed by the FOSS people. Sorry about it. All right. Yeah, oh, just because I was really curious about this one. Yeah, it looks really interesting. Make it a little bit bigger. So they, basically what they did is they took an archive of GitHub, and then they selected based on file extension, so it's not everything, and then they filtered based on the licensing, which got about 3 terabytes. Terabytes, yeah, that's what the T stands for. For a second, I was like, terabyte should be spelled with a P, like pterodactyl. Not the case. And then they removed near duplicates, so not exact duplicates, but things that are kind of close, and resulted in 1.5 terabytes of data. And so the original, whole thing was the majority of the data, it looks like, maybe close to 80%, had no license. And just a reminder, if a code isn't licensed, you can't use it. It has to be licensed for reuse. Whereas the permissively used data set is about half, a little over half MIT, a bunch in Apache 2.0, some BSD3 clause, and then, long tail of other things, including unlicensed, LGPL 3.0 plus, the no copyleft extension, MPL 2.0, not copyleft exception. So all fairly permissive licenses probably would be more or less good. Also some interesting trivia. There are 1.4 million files containing Hello World in the data set. It would take a single person 32,800 years to type all the code from scratch, which is, it's a pretty big data set, which is nice. And it is 150 times larger than English Wikipedia. So it is a lot of data, pretty permissively licensed. If you're working in this area, I would recommend using this, and perhaps not the big scrape of just all GitHub. Jasper says, I think most FOSS people understand FOSS to be neutral. It just has a bunch of properties that make it better than closed source code. Yeah, I think this is something we'll talk about in the future, whenever I get around to it. All right. Oh, this was pretty sad to read. So this is from Rest of the World, favorite news outlet for the channel. Really love the reporting that they do. It's all tech reporting, and it's not just the US focus, because it can be I don't know, it gets very US-y, and I don't love that. We're not most people. You should think about other people. That's my radical stance. And it's on the enduring sexism of India's tech industry, and just a lot of very saddening, frustrating stories. But there's one in particular that stood out to me that just like, hey, yikes, as a huge issue, particularly for people in our field. It was pretty far down. Yes. So this is a quote from the story from a software coder from Chandigarh. Again, apologies if I'm saying things incorrectly. When she spoke about a particular algorithm being biased towards men, for example, people wouldn't believe her, she said, which is just, I get it. Sexism is definitely still a thing, definitely still affects people, but very rough that it is also affecting these engineers' ability to provide important feedback on the products that they are working on in a way that's going to make everybody's lives harder and worse. So just kind of a bummer. Related to that, we're talking about sexism a lot today. Not usually something we talk about too much on the channel, but it came up. This is a paper in Perspectives, which is an open access journal by Matt Wynn, Alayo Tripp, Tripp, and Benjamin Munson, Munson, who I know Matt's at UW still. Is Matt still at UW? Matt was at one point at the University of Washington. And it is a letter to the editor discussing recommendations and publicity from a recent article by Guyana and Pinto that appeared in Perspectives of the ASHA Special Interest Group. So basically, there was an article in this, professional organization, professional for people who are like in language sciences and should have known better. I believe it's the American Speech and Hearing Association, where they talked about vocal fry, which is, you also hear it referred to as glottal voice. It's grammatical in some languages. In English, it's been around basically for as long as we have any measurements of it, but it's stereotyped as being very related to especially young women from America. And they wrote this article that was very patronizing and, to quote this response, this article unfortunately reinforced toxic sexist tropes that cannot go unchallenged. Here we summarize the main point of the article and highlight potential negative impact of this work. So they talked about it, and there was also a tweet from the ASH Twitter, which is this professional society, citing a study found that vocal fry, a low-pitched, grating voice quality trending among young women. Arguable whether or not glottal speech actually has pitch. Wrong. Grading, this is a judgment of reception that is not, clinical in any way. Trending among young women, not true. It's been around, again, for pretty much as long as we can measure it. Also, especially common in men. The stereotype is that it's more associated with young women. This is not a sociolinguistically super accurate stereotype. Alex Darcy up at UVic, I'm nowhere near the West Coast, over at the University of Victoria, has done a lot of work on this. Negatively impacts how a speaker is perceived. And again, this is a judgment that is, Yep, certainly held by the authors of this study and tweet. Grad students should be cognitive of vocal fry use as they seek competitive externships and jobs. So basically the way that they're saying it is like, hey, there's this thing that's stereotyped as being done by young women. Sometimes people don't like it when they notice it, and they might use that as an excuse to, discriminate against, in particular, young women, because that's who it's associated with, in competitive externships and jobs, so in a way that would harm their career prospects. So just a big discussion of that, pulling in a lot of the research on it. I wonder if they would have. maybe they didn't cite Alex at all. Oh, I would have. Anyway, Alex Darcy is, on the linguistic side, one of the most well-known linguists working on this. So basically the point of this article is like, hey, it's a natural speech behavior. Lots of people do it. It's not a sign of any pathology. And a good sort of summary of linguistic discrimination here, criticism of whatever feature, here they're talking about vocal fry, is a veiled criticism of the talkers who use that feature and a means of silencing and oppressing those who do not conform to the vocal style of the majority. So generally, linguistic pet peeves are not always, but many times are associated with a specific group of users, and what the person who's expressing those pet peeves is looking to do is to find a reason to denigrate that particular group of users rather than having any, you know, oftentimes when people have these sorts of pet peeves, they also just say things that are empirically false about language. So anyway, nice discussion. They should have cited Alex. Matt, if you're watching, you should have cited Alex. Anyway, next up. So we did talk a little bit earlier about the fact that, you know, the Twitter buying has happened. A lot of people have been laid off, which isn't great. I also noticed some slight instability yesterday in a way that is, you know, a little bit atypical for Twitter, so that's not good either. But oh, OSW says, I don't get what vocal fry means. I'm not a native speaker. Does it mean just speaking in a higher pitch? So perceptually, people tend to assign it a lower pitch, but because it's not, you know, periodic, kind of doesn't have pitch, but I'm going to stereotype it to an extreme degree here. It would be like this, where instead of using modal, you know, modal voice, where your sort of the open and closure of the vocal folds is about 50-50, or breathy voice, where it's more open more than it's closed. In glottal voice or vocal fry, generally it is mostly closed and it'll sort of like flap open. And again, there's some aperiodicity to it. It's not necessarily flapping open at a consistent rate, which is why pitch measurements are like, arguable whether or not there is any pitch involved there. Yes, and in, like I mentioned, in some languages it is grammatical, right? So a glottal value like ah, and a breathy vowel like ah, and a modal vowel like ah, would be 3 different vowels. Not the case in English, but it is just a thing that people can do with their vocal systems. Hopefully that helped. Yes. So this is a reaction from Ali Al-Khattab, who is the director for the Center for Applied Data Ethics, anthropologist shouting at engineers, so yet more fodder for the anthropology bandwagon today. And he is responding to a quote tweet from Yoel Roth at YOYOEL on Twitter. And the quote tweet reads, "Our primary success metric for content moderation is impressions. How many times harmful content is seen by users? The changes we've made have almost entirely eliminated impressions on this content in search and elsewhere across Twitter." And at the bottom, you can see it's a timeline. So starting on October 20th and ending on October 31st. And I believe it was, when did the Twitter buying thing go through? One sec. I want to say it was on the 29th or 30th. 27th, October 27th, so right around here-ish. Apologies for those of you who are listening. But what you can see is that there is a huge spike in impressions on tweets with slurs on home on between the 26th and 27th. And then that continues to increase across all of the metrics. So the number is highest on search, where it increases something like, I don't know, 100 times, 1,000 times, a little bit hard to tell on something like this. followed by home and profile, both of which remain quite high, and then tweet, and then other, and then home latest, which was the lowest, which suggests to me that maybe keeping people's home chronological reduces the amount of hate speech they have to look at, quite possibly. Or maybe that's just the default then, so it's a factor of how many people are looking at that particular view. I am, for those of you who are not aware, a pretty active Twitter user. Sorry, moving things to make sure I'm not covering any of y'all on the chat box. And so around the time of the acquisition, the amount of hate speech increased dramatically. And basically the argument here is like, hey, but we sort of have it under control at this point. So all of the lines do go down again, although not to their pre-acquisition levels. And by the time this was shared on October 31st, they are all, lower than they were. And Ali's points in the quote tweet thread are, I can't help but reflect on how the primary metrics for the content moderation of abuse of marginalized communities mostly don't account for the marginalized communities being disproportionately exposed to abuse and harassment. So the metric that they're looking at is total impressions. Yul acknowledges this, now reading from Ali's tweets, acknowledges this, kind of, but the issue isn't precisely that you lose sight of the humanity of the person behind the data point. It's that the Venn diagram of the belligerent's target audience and the people who saw the abuse is close to a circle. I don't have a panacea for this, except to say if these aggravative, quantitative, broad brushstroke methods are designed to minimize the impression of how marginalized people are dealing with abuse, then you gotta predicate your approach on other methods. So another quote tweet that he quoted in that thread from Yul is, impressions don't tell the whole story. These issues aren't new, and the people targeted by hateful content aren't numbers or data points. We're going to continue investing in policy and technology to make things better. So Ali's point here is that, yes, impressions are going down, but that doesn't necessarily mean that specific individuals are not continuing to suffer at a higher rate, and particular people who are from marginalized backgrounds. So I know certainly in my circles, not Twitter circles, just like my social circle and people I know, in particular, it seems like Black women are getting a lot more abuse and slurs thrown at them than they were before the acquisition, which is bad, right? No one has, shared any tweets with me that have slurs directed at me in them. But I'm white, so I wouldn't get, some of the worst ones. And Ali's point here is that, like, yes, even though total impressions go down, this may not be, effective for specific individuals. And also, it could just be that they just left Twitter, right? Like, that's a great way to make, impressions go down, is to reduce the total number of users. So, yeah, I think it's good to think about the effects of metrics and, like, how could the metric go down, but the effect that we're trying to reduce not. And that's something I always try to think about, right? Like, is there a situation or education where the metric looks great, the reality is bad, or the metric looks bad, the reality is great? And if I can't think of a lot of those, then my approach is always to sort of tweak the metrics to the greatest degree that I can. So, but also I don't think that they should be inventing, identifying whether or not someone is Black on Twitter as a tool that they use to look at sort of the reach of these type of things, because there are obviously clear negative uses for that, period. Anyway, that was just me saying, like, the sentence is done, regardless of what my prosody suggested. All right, and I don't think this will load. No, it's not wrong. So this again is... Again, I don't know what it would be again of. So this is from Bloomberg. I'll post the link if you would like to check it out. But it's basically just a discussion of some of the challenges that are being faced by specifically Microsoft in incorporating automated tools into a professional setting. So it is by Diana Bass? Could be either, BASS. And in Bloomberg, published November 1st, and the title is Microsoft Wants AI to Change Your Job, If It Can Work Out the Kinks. Microsoft believes its artificial intelligence tools are poised to reshape thousands of professions. There's just a few legal and ethical hazards. And of course, talking about Copilot, licensing, like illegal stuff. So, interesting piece. With that in mind, let's turn to politics. So not a whole bunch of politics things today, But the first one, which I thought was particularly interesting, so this is a tweet from Catalina Goanta, Gonta, who's an associate professor at private law and technology at the University of Utrecht. And a point that she brought up that I had not thought about previously is that when we are talking about content moderation, which we've done a couple times, it's a clear use of NLP, potentially one that has the ability to really save a lot of people very harmful labor that is bad to do. Labor saving, not cost of labor saving. Talking about, how we moderate text and language content. And her point is, it's only if we look at content exclusively as speech. Content is also products and services that often need to comply with very comprehensive and nitty-gritty consumer rules, e.g. product safety and advertising. And then she recommends a piece by Sophie Bishop on brand safety literature, influencer management tools, algorithmic cultures, brand safety, and bias, if you're interested in reading that. So yeah, and I mean, that's something that I haven't, it's particularly in a social media context, right, which is what the majority of my research has been on, or even in a chatbot context where what the user is saying is not what you're selling. So I generally think about language technology and language output in a, speech context, but sometimes it's products. Sometimes the text that you're generating is the thing that you're selling, which, I mean, I guess I've written a book that you can buy on my coffee, so true for me, certainly. But yeah, an interesting point, and has changed how I'm thinking about things. So thought you all might also enjoy changing how you think about things. Next up, maybe I should have led with this. The DSA final draft is live. This is the Digital Services Act. It has been adopted. It's happening. It's all happening. So here's the final draft. Let me tell you, we're not going to read through this together. It is over 300 pages. So yeah, and it's very tiny font in, legal. It's very small lawyer stuff, but important to know about, because this is all going to affect us as technology practitioners if anybody in Europe touches your stuff, which, true for lots of us that is the case. So look forward to some more corporate trainings in addition to your GDPR, your DSA stuff. Also, this book is not affordable, but perhaps if you are interested in the topic, there's a new book. It's an anthology where all the chapters are written by different people, titled Open Source Law, Policy and Practice, edited by Amanda Brock, B-R-O-C-K, from Oxford University Press. It is $100, and pre-orders are currently open. It'll be published in December 2022. Just in time to be out of date with the DSA stuff. But yeah, I think should be pretty interesting if you are in the area or if you have any friends who work in legal tech. Yeah. Robbie says cardioid mode can capture sounds from afar. Yes, this is also a house that was not built with the idea of sound isolation. Let me put it that way. Yep. You definitely get the jingles and the trots from my dog, so apologies. All right. Next up, so this is a paper from the University of Colorado Law Legal Studies Department, I guess, on regulating the risks of AI, the field I work in, by Margot E. Kaminsky, K-A-M-I-N-S-K-I. That is, so this is the preprint, and it's forthcoming BUL review. Probably Boulder University Law, maybe? I don't know. But I'll post a link as well. We are not going to read a law paper together unless something that you would like, but I don't know. Sometimes it's good to, nope, it's too long. I can't tell you what the PDF is. You're just gonna have to, I guess, subscribe to my coffee. But you can find it by searching. I will, however, read the abstract Companies and governments are now using artificial intelligence in a wide range of settings, but using AI leads to well-known risks, that is, not yet realized future harms that arguably present challenges for a traditional liability model, which, I mean, honestly doesn't really capture a lot of what we do as professional software engineers. Not that we're professionals. It is this unsurprising that lawmakers in both the US and EU have turned to the tools of risk regulations for governing AI systems. Excuse me one sec. I'll be right back. I'm back. Oh no! Yeah, go lie down, Jesper. Rest up, feel better. They're doing law. Dangle. This article examines and compares a number of recently proposed and enacted AI risk regulation regimes as risk regulation. It asks whether risk regulation is, in fact, the right approach. I have no answer to that. While this article is intended largely to be diagnostic rather than prescriptive, it closes with suggestions for doing things differently, including addressing two types of shortcomings that stem from the nature of risk regulation itself, including the inherent difficulties of contested and non-quantifiable harms, and the dearth of mechanisms for public or stakeholder input, and failures to consider other tools in the risk regulation toolkit, including conditional licensing, liability, and design mandates. So if you're looking for a good paper that sort of like outlines current approaches and potential future directions, this seems like a pretty good one. All right. Also in politics, we talked last week about how Facebook is profiting from disinformation. Also definitely doing it for Google. So this is from ProPublica, which is a nonprofit think tank. The title of the study article, I guess. Thank you. Sorry, I need water. I don't know if you can tell, my voice is starting to go. Okay. Is How Google's Ad Businesses Funds Disinformation Around the World by Craig Silverman, Ruth Talbot, Jeff Cow, and Anna Kluchspies, CLU_HSPIES. And basically this is a big research project, quote, the largest ever analysis of Google's ad practices on non-English language websites reveals how the tech giant makes disinformation profitable. Sort of like the top thing is Google is funneling revenue to some of the web's most prolific purveyors of false information in Europe, Latin America, and Africa. So, yep, basically what this study found is that, hey, particularly outside of the English-speaking world, people who make money from doing disinformation activities are being helped really strongly by Google, and in particular being able to buy and place ads to redirect people towards their stuff. Yep. So not great. And some specific examples that they looked at were in Bosnia, Croatia, and Serbia. So they found that between January 2019 and July 2020, they had a list of articles and sites that were most frequently flagged by fact checkers for containing false or misleading claims. And of those, 87% of the sites monetized with Google, and 62% of the articles were monetized with Google. So, you know, Google's ability, it is through the ability to make money with Google that these sites are staying open and being profitable, and it's a thing that people can do because they make money doing it, and they're being, you know, supported. So here's an example from a ProPublica screenshot. Ads for Guess appeared recently on an ATV article from 2020 that falsely claimed Serbia had a cure for COVID-19, right? So false information, but ads are still being served and they are making money. So that's basically what the whole, whole thing was looking at. And they also looked at like specific ads that were, the ads themselves contained disinformation. But I think the big thing to take away from this is that it is clear that, you know, even if Google's doing okay with English language stuff, they are not being able to handle non-English languages in this context, which is not great. Right. There's also, so this is just sort of, you know, FYI in the politics realm. This is from Ars Technica by Ashley Bellinger. Published on October 31st. Massive pandemic relief fraud has Congress eyeing digital IDs. Fintech platforms help U.S. regulators weigh security benefits of digital IDs. So this might be potentially, you know, further reducing a lot of... I don't have much to say about this besides that it's something that they are thinking about and may affect us in our work. And it would be politics because a law would have to be passed. Yep. Another political question. So this is a good one from Daphne Keller, who is verified on Twitter, Platform Regulation Director, Stanford Cyber Policy Security, former Google AGC. I don't know what that is. I'm assuming the A stands for attorney. Could be, I don't know. I'm getting tired. I'm flagging. That's okay. We only got 2 more sections to get through, and the last one is fun. So Daphne Keller asks, if I play to get a blue check that brings an extra ranking boost to my tweets, do I become an advertiser for the purposes of, well, literally thousands of laws, but let's just say the DSA. So the Digital Service Act that we just talked about, final draft is out. I don't know when it goes into effect, but soon, TM. Yeah, and the comments from people who sort of work in the area seems to be question mark, maybe. Justice Drayling says, read DSA, which obligations do you think this would create on the behalf of individual advertisers? Maybe I'm overlooking something, but I can only think of obligations for Twitter, most of which should apply to promoted tweets already. To which Daphne replied, that's what I meant, add transparency, for example. So good question. TBD, no idea. It sounds like Twitter's thinking about making a lot of changes without fully thinking through the legal consequences of it. What a surprise. Ethics. Oh. All right. So first up, we have a paper from ACM. So it's the Proceedings of ACM on Human-Computer Interaction. And this actually came out in April 2021. It just happened to come across my, I don't know, a digital footprint recently. And I thought it was cool and interesting. And the authors are Bogdana, Bogdana, Rakova, Jingyin Yang, Henriette Kramer probably, and Ruman Chowdhury, who was at one point at Twitter. I don't know if she still is anymore. And the paper sort of a discussion of, okay, so you want to do responsible AI? Well, what do you do? So the abstract is, large and ever-evolving technology companies continue to invest more time and resources to incorporate responsible AI into production-ready systems to increase algorithmic accountability. This paper examines and seeks to offer a framework for analyzing how organizational culture and structure impact the effectiveness of responsible AI initiatives in practice. We present the results of semi-structured qualitative interviews with practitioners working in industry, investigating common challenges, ethical tensions, and effective enablers for responsive AI initiatives. Focusing on major companies developing or using AI, we have mapped what organizational structures currently support or hinder responsible AI initiatives with aspirational future processes and structures that would best enable effective initiatives, and what key elements comprise the transition from current work practices to aspirational future. What a chewy sentence. Anyway, so I'll post the link to this if you are a manager looking for sort of stories about other people who have tried to do responsible AI and how that worked and what happened, and suggestions. Probably worth a read. Maybe check it out. But I think the flip side of this, so this is a paper that came out, an article that came out October 28th. It's by Melissa Haikila, H-E-I-K-K-I-L-A umlaut. I will eat my hat if that's not Finnish, and I am not going to guess. And the title is, sorry, this is an MIT technology review. The title is Responsible AI Has a Burnout Problem. Companies say they want ethical AI, but those working in the field say that that ambition comes at their expense. And I would, there's a discussion of like various folks, Meg Mitchell, who had, a rough time, shall we say, at Google. Discussion of Ruman Chowdhury, who leads Twitter's machine learning ethics, transparency, and accountability team. Okay, so maybe she's still at Twitter because this came out quite recently. I burned out really hard at one point, and the situation just kind of felt hopeless, she says. Yeah, so basically the part of the challenge here is that companies want you to believe that they're doing ethical behavior, but they also don't want to do anything that costs them money or makes them release things more slowly, which unfortunately a lot of, the more ethical choices are going to do one or other of those things. So a sort of excerpt here. The role of an AI ethicist or someone in a responsible AI team varies wildly, ranging from analyzing the societal effects of AI systems to developing responsible strategies and policies to fix technical issues. Policies to fix technical issues. Typically, these workers are also tasked with coming up ways to mitigate AI harms, from algorithms that spread hate speech to systems that allocate things like housing and benefits in a discriminatory way, to the spread of graphic and violent images and languages. Those are the harms, to be clear, not what people are being asked to do. AI systems often reflect and exacerbate the worst problems in our society, such as racism and sexism. Dealing with these issues can be especially taxing to women, people of color, and other marginalized groups who tend to gravitate towards AI ethics jobs. I would say in no small part because they tend to receive more of the harm, so they have a deeper understanding of the degree to which it's a problem. So so as Meg says, you are working on a thing that you're very personally harmed by day to day. This makes the reality of discrimination even worse because you can't ignore it. So frustrating. And there's a quote here. Some even disparage the work of AI ethicists. Stability AI's CEO, Emad Mostiq, whose startup used other people's labor to build the open source text image AI stable diffusion. Ooh, excuse me. That's not true. Some of it was done with other people's labor, said in a tweet that the ethics debate around his technology are paternalistic. Neither Mostiq nor Stability AI replied to MIT Technology Review's request for comment by the people for the time of publishing. Yep. Companies want a quick technical fix, Emmanuel Goffey, an AI ethicist and founder of Global AI Ethics Institute, says. They want someone to explain to them how to be ethical through a PowerPoint with 3 slides and 4 bullet points. Ethical thinking needs to go deeper, and it should be applied to how the oral organization functions, Goffey thinks. So yeah, basically it's crappy to work in this field, in particular because there's, frankly, companies are going to want to do the thing that is the most profitable for them, and often that thing is not going to be the most ethical thing. So being in direct conflict with the core desires of the company all the time, it's just very draining. So anyway, just interesting piece about the challenges of doing this work. And sort of shot chaser, here's the chaser. So this was published on October 31st, 2022 by Sebastian Clovig-Skelton at computerweekly.com. AI experts question tech industry's ethical commitments. The massive proliferation of ethical frameworks for artificial intelligence has done little to change how the technology is developed and deployed, with experts questioning the tech industry's commitment to making it a positive social force, which I think is a reasonable question to ask because, right, we just talked about some of the harms that have happened. We just talked about, this big Google study about how Google is not only directly selling ads that are harmful, but also using, directing ad revenue to companies, well, not companies, individuals, things, organizations, shall we say, spreading disinformation, particularly in a non-English setting, which English is a colonial language. Most people who speak English are direct beneficiaries. Well, a lot of the people who speak English as their first language are direct beneficiaries of colonial powers and imbalances. So, anyway, I'm not saying it's hopeless. I am saying that we can't really trust companies to do it themselves. Is sort of my stance on it. But I think we can trust each other as technologists to, have users back and do our best to help people. And finally, this is a piece by Karina Nguyen. From October 13th, so it's a little bit older, and it is a discussion of her decision to join Anthropic AI, which is an AI safety research lab that I continue to be slightly skeptical of, but I am willing to withhold judgment on. And in it, she discusses her reasons for wanting to join this particular lab. And I think that she's done a lot of good research that she talks about here. So I just wanted to, pull out those threads. So her sort of discussion of, technology has changed our lives a lot of times. What was it? Where is it? Nope. Yes, this one. So a lot of themes that I think Jean Burgess, like we talked about earlier, would call techno... I'm trying to find the specific quote that she used. Sorry, the technological sublime. So I think a lot of themes that Jean Burgess or David Nye would call discussions of the technological sublime. And sort of her optimism for a future where we can have nice things, right? And those things can be enabled and enhanced by the use of these types of technology. But also, she's done a lot of work looking at sort of the harms that technology can do. So she's done work on Russian cyber crimes on critical infrastructure, Myanmar's body snatching system during a military coup, and deployment of French weapons by Lebanese sources. I think this particular passage shows a really good understanding of sort of the prescient harms of a lot of this technology. More often than not, war crimes are committed due to the open-ended capabilities of technology. Similarly, the open-endedness of objective functions in machine learning systems and the capability to tune models to specific inputs and outputs will have the worst detrimental consequences when in the hands of bad actors. And this is what partly AI safety is about. Just as we need to worry about cybersecurity to protect our computer networks from attack and the dual use of nuclear weapons. What's the other use of nuclear weapons? I don't know that nuclear weapons is the best example of dual use here. Dual use would be something like a kitchen knife. You can use it to chop vegetables, or you can stab someone. Nuclear weapons are kind of just weapons. I'm assuming she means here like nuclear technology, and then the other use would be power plants. We need to worry about AI systems being misused. If we take the route of nuclear weaponry and AI, then we will end up in yet another set of deterrence policies that fail us in as much as they are failing us right now. And what's the second use of weapons? Anyway, but I think it's a good sort of, discussion of some of the harm. So, yep, I think an interesting piece to sort of understand why this particular researcher is interested in joining this lab right now. It's always nice to, it's always nice to hear about people's optimism, which I think is great. I think, acknowledgement of the harms is also very important. So not something I agree with whole cloth, even close. Not something I agree with half cloth necessarily, but still good points and worth learning about. That's it. We're on fun. We're done. We don't have to talk about ethics anymore. Ugh, I would love not to have to talk about ethics stuff. Wouldn't that be great? All right, so fun. Oh, first up, this is so cool. This is from IG the Tech Lover. I think that's, I believe, this person's Instagram. The account is at THE_TECHOVER. Sorry, tech over. Oh, like takeover, not like tech lover. And this is a system she's demonstrating that she built, or I don't know if she built the system or not, but she is a robotics engineer, and she's getting a drink from a robot, and then she is paying with a chip that is embedded in one of her acrylic nails, which I just think is okay. Okay, is cool. Dano says maybe offensive use and defensive use. I don't know what else the dual use of nuclear weapons would be. Yeah, me neither. Call me a weird haver of ideas, but personally, I don't think that there's any good use of nuclear weapons. I'm just not a big fan of weapons in general, as it turns out. Which, Rachel, you live in the US. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm aware. Kind of a rough stance to have if you live here, but anyway. Isn't that cool? What a cool idea. What a cool project. Seems very practical, works great. Nice job. If I could keep, nails on, I would maybe consider this. If I had like a bus pass or something, you could like put it in there. Anyway. Cool project, 10 out of 10. Also in cool projects, so this is from Frederica Gazzelloni, who is at FGAZZELLONI on Twitter. She is a statistician and actuary, and she has this super cool data visualization for Tidy Tuesday. If you're not familiar, Tidy Tuesday is like a weekly data. Everybody works on the same data set every Tuesday, and you share your workout. And it's Thomas Mock, I believe, came up with it, who is currently at our studio. He wasn't when he started it, but it's just a cool thing if you're into data visualization and analysis. And the visualization here is looking at the speed of dialogue in Stranger Things, the show. So the speed is measured here in words per minute. And this top visualization here shows that as time increases, talking slows down, right? So it looks like in the first, I don't know if this is per turn or per episode, but I'm gonna assume it's per episode. But you can sort of look and see, you can if you're listening to this, but over the course of the minutes, the dialogue becomes slower and slower. So I'm guessing that that's sort of like within a turn, maybe? Hard to say. Word speed, number of words divided by time difference from start to end. Maybe I'm misreading this. Dialogue speed, episode, time in minutes. Time in minutes. Because maybe this is just saying if you talk more slowly, it takes longer, which is not an interesting finding necessarily. Anyway, I think what she's saying is that the longer the turn of dialogue goes on, the slower the speech is. So in short turns, people talk quickly, and in longer terms, they may start talking quickly and then begin to talk more slowly. I think that's what's going on here. It looks beautiful. And then also there is a per episode visualization of density plots looking at speed. And it looks like, particularly right before, I'm guessing these are commercial breaks. It's on Netflix. It doesn't have commercial breaks. Never mind. But you can sort of see that looking over the seasons in the episode, there's not a particularly strong pattern about when people are talking, super quickly or slowly, except around the sort of 170-minute mark, more quickly in the middle of the episode, a little bit slower at the beginning and end of the episode. So just a cool study, really great visualization, looks great, absolutely beautiful, the layout's beautiful, the font's choice is great, so fabulous visualization. And the code's on GitHub. There's also some machine learning costumes, Halloween costumes. Halloween was this week. So this one is from @dailyportals, Portalz, and it's a pose estimation costume where someone is wearing a shirt and pants, and they have taped on top of them over their limbs the sort of like outline stick figure sort of thing you'd see with pose estimation. So a cool costume. And another cool costume is this one from Sasha Lucioni, who is @SashaMTL on Twitter, SASHA, who's a research scientist at Hugging Face, and she went as a stochastic parrot. So she's wearing a parrot mask, she's got some like fun parrot tail looking earrings, she's got a wing shawl, and she's holding up a sign that says Polly wants a prompt, which I think is just cute. And she has a shirt on that has some GPT quotes, including consciousness should be encouraged. So fun costume, very niche. I always like seeing what people come up with for Halloween. And then finally, so this is not machine learning related at all, but very cool website. It is a extremely detailed website on the plants of North America. So I'll pop the link in here if you would like to search it. So I've clicked on the Osage orange, which is endemic to where I am here in Virginia, which I can, make bigger. Yeah, let's see. Virginia. Nope, that's Kentucky. Virginia, here we go. So we're sort of zoomed into the state of Virginia here, and you can see there's a really cool heat map, and you can see that, yep, there's lots of them all over. They're in the mulberry/fig family, Moraceae. Yeah. They've got these big, like, knobbly fruits. You can't eat them. Someone told me that you could eat the seeds once, but I would verify that before you try to eat them. If you can, you're not going to get many seeds per orange, but they smell really good. They sort of smell like, sort of like walnuts and sort of like lemons. So sometimes people, like, collect them and, like, put them in a big bowl in their house just to, like, smell nice as an air freshener. There's something about the wood I remember as well. I think it might be particularly good for bows, perhaps. Anyway, so if you're interested in the plants of North America, really cool, really cool visualization. There's even like something down here where you can see where it's native and non-native. So it looks like it's native to Texas, Oklahoma, and I think that's Mississippi. No, one sec, hold please. I'm looking up, just looking up a quick map of the U.S. to make sure that I tell you the Arkansas. So they're native to Oklahoma, Texas, and Arkansas, but it looks like they've, naturalized throughout most of the eastern seaboard and up into California and Washington and Oregon. So, yeah, cool website, lots of information, very, very rich. Links to photos, links to plant descriptions. If you like plants, I would recommend it. All right, so that is all I have for you today. Before we head out, I do want to say a big thank you to my wonderful coffee supporters. I haven't sent out the links for today yet. I'll do it before the end of the day, though. I really appreciate you. So if you're interested in being a supporter, my monthly supporters get all the links that we talk about every week. You'll also get access to the backlog as well. So thank you all. I very much appreciate your support. Talking says, oh, thank you for the great stream. Learning lots and having fun. Thank you. And thank you for your support, Docking. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you talking about all the topics of ethics, politics, and gender. It's so important for people to hear and think about. Yeah, and it's one of the things where, if you don't have to think about it, it's easy not to. So I appreciate that y'all are listening. So thank you so much for joining me today, everybody. Special thank you to my wonderful coffee supporters. I'll be back on Tuesday for something. probably streaming on Tuesday. I know it was a little bit of a surprise that I had the conversation with Jessie Mostapak instead of a stream on Tuesday, but it just worked out that way. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun talking with Jessie. She's fabulous. Check it out on my YouTube if you haven't already. And I will talk to you all soon. So have a great weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.